The first thing Clara Bennett understood that night was that love could keep a woman warm in bed and still leave her nameless by morning. The Alpha King's chambers were quiet, too quiet for a room that belonged to the most powerful man in the Northern Territories. Moonlight rested on the black marble floor. The fireplace had burned low. A half-empty glass of wine stood beside the bed, untouched since Alexander Whitmore had fallen asleep. His breathing was deep and even behind her, steady with the confidence of a man who had never had to wonder whether the world would still be waiting when he opened his eyes. Clara sat at the edge of his bed in her white nightgown, bare feet touching the cold floor. She did not move for a long time, not because she was unsure, because once she stood, the life behind her would end. On the pillow beside Alexander's hand lay the silver cloak clasp he had given her 3 winters ago. Not in court, not before the pack, not beneath banners or witnesses. Here, in this room, in secret, he had fastened it at her throat and said, "It suits you." Clara had been foolish enough to hear more in those words. She touched the clasp now. Her fingers were calm. That surprised her. Earlier, her hands had shaken so badly she could not close the physician's note hidden inside her sleeve. Pregnant. The word had looked too small for the weight it carried. 1 line of ink. 1 changed life. 1 heartbeat inside her body that had already made the room feel different. She had come to tell him. Before dawn. Before council. Before Lady Victoria Ashford stood beside him in the royal hall with the smile of a woman already measuring the crown. Clara had thought, for one last fragile hour, that maybe a child would make Alexander choose clearly. Then she heard his voice beyond the chamber door. Low, tired, impatient. Counselors had gathered in the outer room after midnight. They thought she slept. They thought the closed door made her invisible. People always believed closed doors protected powerful men from the women they wounded behind them. She cannot remain undefined, Your Majesty, Lord Havers had said. Lady Victoria's family is demanding clarity. And Clara? Beta Marcus had asked quietly. There had been a pause long enough to kill something. Then Alexander said, "She knows what this is." Clara had stood behind the door with one hand pressed to her stomach. What this is? Not love, not future, not mate, not queen. A chamber, a warmth, a secret kept close enough to use and far enough to deny. Another counselor had spoken, sharper. Then she must understand she was never meant to be queen. Alexander had not corrected him. That was the sentence that emptied her. Not the insult, the silence after it. Now, in the pale hour before dawn, Clara looked over her shoulder at the sleeping Alpha King. Dark blonde hair against the black pillow, strong jaw relaxed, one hand open, as if even in sleep he expected the world to place what he wanted inside it. He was beautiful. She hated that beauty for surviving the truth. For 3 years, she had lived between his walls and his hesitation. Close enough for his scent to cover her skin. Close enough for servants to lower their eyes. Close enough for loneliness to dress itself as devotion. But not close enough to be named. Not close enough to be defended. And now there was a child. Clara's hand moved to her stomach again. The child was no bigger than a secret. That was why she had to leave. If she stayed, they would name the baby after shame. They would hide him behind corridors, soften his existence with political language, and call it protection. Alexander might love the child in private, as he had loved Clara in private. That would be worse than not being loved at all. The first line of dawn touched the window. Clara stood. Slowly, without sound. She took the silver clasp from the pillow and held it one last time. The metal was cold. It had always been cold. She only understood that now. Then she placed it beside Alexander's hand. Not on a letter. Not with an explanation. Explanations were for people who had not already heard enough. She crossed the room and gathered her plain cloak from the chair. No jewels. No royal colors. No trace of the woman the palace whispered about, but never bowed to. At the door, she stopped. Her heart did not ask her to turn back. That hurt too. There had been a time when leaving him would have felt like tearing skin from bone. Tonight, it felt like stepping out of a room that had been slowly stealing air. Behind her, Alexander shifted in his sleep. Clara froze. His hand moved across the pillow, searching the place where she had been. For one dangerous second, her chest broke open. Then his fingers brushed the silver clasp. He did not wake. Of course he did not. Clara opened the door. The outer chamber was empty now. The council gone. The candles nearly dead. Their words still remained, thicker than smoke. She walked through them, past the table where men had discussed her future without inviting her to sit, past the high-backed chair where Alexander had listened while another man said she was never meant to be queen, past the mirror where she caught one final glimpse of herself. A white American woman with fair skin, auburn hair loose over her shoulders, soft round face pale from sleeplessness, hazel eyes too dry for someone leaving the man she loved. She looked calm. That was good. People stopped women who looked broken. They ignored women who looked finished. Clara pulled the cloak over her hair and stepped into the servant corridor. No one shouted. No one chased her. No alarm rang through the palace. The world did not know a royal heir was leaving before sunrise inside the body of a woman no one had bothered to name. At the end of the passage, old guard Elias stood beside the side door, lantern in hand. His eyes widened when he saw her, then lowered to the small bag in her grip. He knew. Not everything. Enough. My lady, he whispered. Clara almost laughed. Lady. A kindness with no power behind it. Open the door, Elias. His jaw tightened. Does His Majesty know? Clara looked back down the corridor. At the darkness. At the room. At the life where she had been close enough to warm his bed, but not worthy of his throne. No, she said. Elias hesitated. Then opened the door. Cold dawn air entered like mercy. Clara stepped over the threshold. She did not run. She did not look back. Behind her, the Alpha King slept with a silver clasp beside his hand. Before her, the road disappeared into gray morning. And beneath her palm, hidden under her cloak, the smallest life in the kingdom left its father's palace without a name. The second thing Clara Bennett understood that night was that a woman did not need to be thrown away loudly to know she had been discarded. Sometimes it happened through grammar. A single word. This. She knows what this is. The sentence followed her down the servant corridor like a second shadow. Her cloak brushed the stone wall. Her small bag weighed almost nothing in her hand. Inside were 2 dresses, 1 pair of worn shoes, a little money she had saved from sewing work the palace never knew she did, and the physician's note folded so tightly the paper had softened at the creases. Pregnant. She had not shown Alexander. Now she knew she never would. Not like this. Not while the word could be taken from her and turned into royal inconvenience. Behind her, the Alpha King's chambers remained silent. Ahead of her, Dawn waited behind the side door Elias had opened. But Clara did not step through immediately. For one moment, she stood between the palace and the road, caught inside the memory of the conversation that had ended her life there. It had begun with Lord Havers. His voice had carried easily through the half-open panel near the private study, polished with the kind of confidence noblemen used when discussing women who were not present enough to defend themselves. Lady Victoria's family will not wait another season, Your Majesty. The Ashford alliance secures the eastern houses. The crown needs a visible Luna. A visible Luna. Clara had been standing behind the inner chamber door in a robe Alexander had chosen for her. Dark blue. Soft. Expensive. Private. She remembered looking down at the sleeve and realizing it was the kind of beautiful thing no one was meant to see. Alexander had answered after a pause. I am aware of what the crown needs. No anger. No refusal. Only fatigue. That tired tone of a man who disliked pressure but had not decided to resist it. Beta Marcus had been the only one who spoke her name. And Clara Bennett? A silence followed. Clara's hand had gone still on the doorframe. She had waited. Foolishly. Even then. Maybe love was not destroyed by cruelty first. Maybe it was destroyed by all the small seconds a woman gave a man to prove he would not be cruel, and he spent them hesitating. Lord Havers exhaled as if the name itself were a nuisance. The girl has been kept too close for too long. People whisper. The girl. Clara had been 26. Old enough to bleed. Old enough to be touched. Old enough to be hidden. Still girl when men wanted to shrink her. Another counselor, Lord Brenner, had spoken next. She has no title. No family influence. No political weight. Whatever affection His Majesty has shown her, it cannot stand against the needs of the kingdom. Clara remembered touching her stomach then. Not because the baby had moved. It was far too early. But because her body already knew what the room did not. There was weight inside her now. A future. A life. A royal bloodline the council would have cared about immediately if it had existed inside a woman they respected. Alexander's voice came colder. Choose your words carefully. Clara's breath caught. For one heartbeat, hope returned. Small, embarrassing, alive. Lord Brenner bowed. She could hear the rustle of fabric. My king, I mean no offense. But she was never meant to be queen. That was when time changed. Not stopped. Changed. Every sound grew separate. The fire in the outer room. The small crack of cooling wax. Marcus shifting his weight. Alexander breathing once. Then saying nothing. Nothing. No blade drawn. No command. No, her name is Clara. No, do not speak of her that way. No, leave. Just silence. The kind men later called restraint. The kind women remembered as abandonment. Then Lord Havers, softer now because victory made men generous, continued. If she is reasonable, she will understand. She knows what this is. Alexander finally answered. She does. Clara had closed her eyes. There it was. Not shouted. Not denied. Agreed. She knows what this is. As if her heart had signed a contract. As if the nights he held her had been clearly labeled temporary. As if the way he touched her hair after nightmares, the way he listened when she spoke of her mother, the way his scent settled on her skin until even servants looked away, none of that had ever required responsibility. She knows what this is. No, Clara had thought. I know now. After that, she moved with the calm of someone whose grief had frozen before it could spill. She returned to the bedchamber. Alexander had already lain down, one arm thrown across the place where she usually slept. He looked exhausted, almost human, almost easy to forgive. She had stood beside him, the physician's note burning inside her sleeve. If she woke him, he might soften. That was the danger. Alexander could be tender when no one watched. He might touch her stomach. He might call the child precious. He might promise to think, to delay, to manage the council, to find a way, a hidden way, a careful way, a way where Clara remained behind doors while Victoria stood beside him beneath the crown. And the child? The child would become another private tenderness, another secret protected just enough to survive, but never enough to stand proudly in sunlight. No, Clara would not let her baby inherit her silence. That decision had carried her from the bed to the pillow, from the silver clasp to the cloak, from the chamber to the corridor. Now Elias held the side door open, his old face pale in the lantern glow. My lady, he whispered again, where will you go? Clara looked at the road beyond the palace wall. Mist covered the path. Good. Mist was kinder than banners. Somewhere he cannot name me too late. Elias swallowed. You should take a horse. No, the roads are not safe. Neither is staying. He flinched at that. Not because she was harsh. Because she was right. For years, Elias had opened doors for kings, counselors, noble brides, ambassadors, and women carried out after being useful to powerful men. Old guards heard more than they repeated, saw more than they survived comfortably. He stepped aside. Then, with shaking fingers, reached beneath his cloak and pulled out a small leather pouch. Take this. Clara looked at it. I cannot. You can. Elias, my daughter left a bad house once, he said quietly. No one opened the door for her. The words entered Clara softly. She took the pouch, not because she wanted charity, because refusing kindness on the night she chose dignity would have been another kind of pride she could not afford. Thank you. Elias nodded once, then looked back toward the palace. If His Majesty asks, he will not ask the right questions soon enough. The old guard lowered his eyes. Clara stepped through the doorway. Cold air touched her face. The eastern sky was gray now, not black. Morning would come whether she was ready or not. Somewhere behind the stone walls, Lady Victoria would wake in guest quarters prepared for a queen. Counselors would polish their reasons. Alexander would open his hand on an empty pillow and find silver instead of skin. Maybe he would be angry. Maybe afraid. Maybe he would say she was dramatic, emotional, ungrateful. Maybe he would say she would come back. Clara walked faster. The palace road curved toward the lower woods, where market carts sometimes passed before sunrise. She kept her hood low. Her lungs burned from cold and fear and something that felt dangerously like relief. At the first bend, she stopped once. Not to look back. To press one hand beneath her cloak, flat against her stomach. You will not be this, she whispered. The word tasted bitter. This. A secret. A compromise. A warm body in a cold room. You will have a name before anyone has the chance to hide you. The promise steadied her more than love ever had. Then Clara Bennett walked into the morning, carrying the Alpha King's unborn child away from the palace that had never made room for either of them. Behind her, the side door closed. Quietly. No alarm. No witness except an old guard, a fading moon, and a silver clasp waiting on a royal pillow. By the time Alexander Whitmore opened his eyes, the woman he believed understood her place had already chosen a world where he no longer got to decide what that place would be. Clara Bennett left the palace through the servant road because women without titles were expected to know the smaller doors. The main gates belonged to kings. The grand staircase belonged to queens. The marble halls belonged to names old enough to be carved into stone. But the narrow passage beneath the east wing belonged to cooks, laundresses, footmen, girls carrying trays, old guards with tired eyes, and women like Clara. Women who had been close to power, but never seated beside it. The morning mist swallowed her before the first bell rang. She kept her hood low and her bag tied against her side. The little leather pouch Elias had given her pressed warm in her palm, though the coins inside could not have held much warmth at all. Still, she carried it like proof that not everyone inside the palace had mistaken silence for consent. Behind her, the stone walls rose pale and enormous against the brightening sky. Clara did not look back. Not once. Looking back belonged to women who wanted to be called. She had already learned the difference between being wanted and being claimed. At the lower road, market carts creaked toward the city. Farmers hunched beneath wool cloaks. A milk boy guided two thin horses. A fishmonger cursed the cold with the devotion of a man who had done it every dawn for 30 years. No one noticed her. That was useful. For 3 years, she had been noticed in the worst possible way. Whispered about. Watched. Measured. Dismissed. Her name passed between servants with sympathy, between nobles with amusement, between counselors with inconvenience. The Alpha King's woman. Not mate. Not Luna. Not queen. His woman. As if belonging to him had been title enough. Clara stepped into the line of market traffic and let the city pull her away from the palace. Her stomach turned once. She stopped beside a stone wall, breath shallow, one hand under her cloak. Not yet, she thought. Please, not here. The sickness passed slowly. A woman selling turnips glanced at her. You all right, miss? Clara lifted her head. The woman had red cheeks, sharp eyes, and dirt beneath her nails. A real woman. A tired woman. A woman whose life did not wait for council permission. Yes, Clara said. Just the cold. The woman looked unconvinced, then reached into her basket and held out a small cloth-wrapped roll. Eat before you fall over. Clara stared at it. I have coin. Didn't ask if you had coin. The woman pushed the roll into Clara's hand and walked on before gratitude could become awkward. Clara held the bread for a long moment, then ate half of it beside the wall, slowly, carefully, as if the child inside her might understand that this was the first meal of their new life. No silver tray, no royal kitchen, no servant lowering her eyes, just bread given by someone who did not know her name and still thought she deserved to stand. That nearly broke her. She swallowed it down with the bread. By midday, Clara had reached the outer coachyard. The palace was no longer visible. That should have made breathing easier. It did not. Every horse sounded like pursuit. Every man in a dark coat made her pulse stumble. Every raised voice carried Alexander's authority in her memory. She waited behind a stack of crates while travelers argued over fares. The northbound coaches were too exposed. The western road too controlled by royal checkpoints. The river barges too slow. She chose a laundry cart. Not glamorous. Not comfortable. Perfect. The driver was a narrow-faced man named Mr. Hobb, who looked at her small bag, her hidden hair, and her pale face with the blunt assessment of someone who had seen many people trying to become unfindable. Briar Hollow, Clara said. His eyebrows rose. Border village. Yes. Long ride. I can pay. He named a price too high. She paid it without bargaining. That made him look at her again. Then he spat into the dirt and jerked his chin toward the covered back of the cart. Climb in. If soldiers stop us, you're my dead sister's niece. Don't speak unless spoken to. Clara climbed in among folded sheets and sacks of lye soap. The smell was harsh. Clean. She pressed her cheek against a bundle of linen and closed her eyes. For the first time since leaving the Alpha King's chambers, exhaustion touched her. Not sleep. Sleep required safety. But the body sometimes collapsed into stillness because it could no longer afford fear at full strength. The cart rolled forward. Wooden wheels struck stones. City noise thinned behind her. Clara kept one hand over her stomach beneath the cloak. Her other hand held the physician's note. She had thought about burning it. Several times. A note was evidence. Evidence could become a chain. But it was also the first proof that the child existed before anyone powerful could deny him. So she kept it. Folded. Hidden. Hers. Near sunset, they reached the first checkpoint. Clara woke to the sound of armored boots. Her entire body went cold. Royal Guards. Whitaker crest on black leather. The cart stopped. Mr. Hobbs sighed loudly, the way men sighed when the world inconvenienced their ordinary greed. What now? A guard's voice answered, bored but sharp. Search order from the palace. A woman left the east wing before dawn. Clara stopped breathing. The sheets around her smelled of soap and dust. Her fingers curled over her stomach. Not fear for herself now. Not only. The guard continued. White woman. Auburn hair. Soft build. Traveling alone. Mr. Hobbs snorted. Half the women in the lower market. Then, watch your mouth. Watch your horse near my wheel. A pause. Clara could imagine the guard's face hardening. Then another voice, younger. Check the back. The canvas lifted. Light cut across the laundry. Clara lowered her head and hunched beneath a gray shawl Mr. Hobbs had tossed over her earlier. Her heart beat so violently she feared the soldiers could hear it. The young guard's eyes moved over the sacks, then stopped on her. You. Clara looked up slowly, not like a frightened noble mistress, like a tired poor relation who had been sick for 2 villages and angry about it. Mr. Hobbs barked from the front, That's my niece. Fever took her mother. She vomits if you speak too loud, so by all means, interrogate her and clean my linens after. The young guard recoiled slightly. Clara pressed a hand over her mouth. It was not difficult to look nauseous. Pregnancy had already made her convincing. The guard lowered the canvas. Nothing here. Another guard muttered. His Majesty said she may be upset, not vanished. His Majesty. Clara closed her eyes. So Alexander was awake. And already wrong. Upset. Not betrayed. Not pregnant. Not gone. Upset. The cart lurched forward after a long minute. Only when the checkpoint disappeared behind them did Clara let herself breathe. Mr. Hobbs called back without turning around. You important? No. People search hard for unimportant women. Clara looked at the physician's note in her hand. I was convenient. The driver grunted. Convenient women are the first ones men panic over when they stop being convenient. Clara almost smiled. Almost. Night fell before they reached the forest road. The temperature dropped. Clara wrapped herself deeper in the cloak Alexander had once removed from her shoulders with such tenderness that she had mistaken it for safety. She should have left it behind. But pride did not warm a body, and the child needed warmth more than Clara needed symbolism. That was the first lesson of motherhood. Survival mattered more than the poetry of leaving. Near midnight, Mr. Hobbs stopped beside a ruined shrine and let the horses drink. You can sleep in the cart, he said. We move again before dawn. Clara climbed down because her legs had cramped painfully. The forest around them was black and wet with moonlight. Somewhere far away, a wolf howled. Her body recognized the sound before her mind did. Not fear. Answer. A strange warmth moved low in her stomach, brief and impossible. Clara froze. The child was far too small. Still, something inside her seemed to listen. Royal blood, she thought, then hated herself for thinking it. Not royal. Not his. Mine. She placed both hands over her stomach and whispered into the cold. You are not a secret. Do you hear me? You are not a mistake. You are not what he failed to name. The wind moved through the trees. No answer came. None was needed. Behind her, Mr. Hobbs cleared his throat, pretending he had not heard. Clara wiped one dry hand over her face. No tears. Still none. Perhaps they would come later, when she had a door she could lock. By the third dawn, Briar Hollow appeared between low hills, small and gray and alive with chimney smoke. No palace towers. No marble. No banners. Just cottages, muddy lanes, a market square, and people too busy surviving to care who had warmed an Alpha King's bed. Clara stepped down from the laundry cart with stiff legs. Mr. Hobbs handed her bag to her. There's an old midwife on Willow Lane, he said. Name's Ruth. Doesn't ask questions unless questions help. Clara looked at him. Why are you helping me? He shrugged. Maybe I dislike kings. Then, after a pause, maybe my dead sister had a niece. Clara paid him the last of what she owed. He took it. then pushed one coin back into her palm. For bread. She did not insult him by refusing. When the cart rolled away, Clara stood alone at the edge of Briar Hollow. The road behind her led to Alexander. The road ahead led to hunger, work, fear, birth, lies she would need to avoid, truths she would need to choose carefully, and a child who would one day ask why he had no father. Clara took one breath, then another. She walked into the village. No one bowed. No one whispered. No one called her his. For the first time in 3 years, Clara Bennett belonged to no man's chamber. And beneath her cloak, the unborn heir of the Alpha King crossed into a life where his first inheritance would not be a crown. It would be a mother who had loved him enough to leave before the world could teach him to be hidden. Alexander Whitmore woke with his hand closed around silver instead of skin. For several seconds, he did not understand. The room was too cold. The fire had fallen into ash. Dawn had entered the Alpha King's chambers without permission, laying pale light across the black marble floor, the empty chair, the wineglass beside the bed, and the place where Clara Bennett should have been. Alexander opened his eyes fully. The pillow beside him was empty. No warmth. No auburn hair spread across the linen. No soft breathing. No quiet body curled near the edge of the bed as if she had never believed she belonged in the center of it. Only the silver cloak clasp. His fingers tightened around it. Once, he had fastened that clasp at her throat and watched color rise in her cheeks. She had looked down, smiling as if he had given her something greater than metal. He had not told her it was beautiful. He had said, "It suits you." A coward's sentence, tender enough to keep her, small enough to deny later. Alexander sat up. Clara. The name struck the chamber walls and returned unanswered. He stood too quickly, bare feet hitting cold marble. The bed cover fell behind him. He crossed to the dressing screen. Empty. The bathing room. Empty. The window seat where she sometimes sat before sunrise with a book she pretended to read while watching the world wake without her. Empty. Her plain cloak was gone. Her small brown bag was gone. The blue robe he had chosen for her lay folded at the foot of the bed. That was the first thing that made anger rise. Folded. Not thrown. Not torn. Not abandoned in tears. Folded. As if she had left with care. As if she had not been taken by panic. As if she had decided. Alexander's jaw hardened. A decision made without him felt too much like rebellion. He pulled on his trousers and opened the chamber door. The outer room smelled of cold wax and last night's council. For a moment, he heard the conversation again. Lady Victoria's family will not wait another season. The crown needs a visible Luna. And Clara? She knows what this is. The words returned with irritating clarity. Alexander pushed them away. He had been tired, pressured, surrounded by men who believed crowns were held together by bloodlines and marriages, not private tenderness. He had not meant Clara was nothing. He had meant she understood complexity. She understood him. She always had. That was why her absence irritated him before it frightened him. He rang for servants. 3 arrived at once, pale and stiff. Find Clara Bennett, Alexander ordered. No one moved quickly enough. His voice lowered. Now. They scattered. Within minutes, the palace woke wrong. Not with bells. With whispers. Servants moving too fast in corridors. Guards questioned at side doors. Stable boys dragged from sleep. Chambermaids shaking their heads. No one had seen much. No one had heard a cry. No broken lock. No struggle. Only old guard Elias at the east service door, standing too straight when Beta Marcus brought him in. Alexander stood in the center of the outer chamber, fully dressed now, silver clasp closed in his fist. Elias bowed low. Too low. Alexander noticed. You were on the east door before dawn. Yes, your majesty. Did Clara Bennett pass you? The old guard's face tightened. A small thing. Enough. Alexander stepped closer. Answer. Yes. The room went still. Marcus, standing near the study table, looked sharply at Elias. Alexander's voice grew quiet. And you let her leave? Elias kept his eyes lowered. She asked me to open the door. She asked. Yes, your majesty. She was alone? Yes. Distressed. Elias hesitated. Alexander hated the hesitation. She was calm, the guard said. Calm. The word entered the room like an insult. Alexander's hand tightened around the clasp until the edge bit into his palm. Where did she go? I do not know. You did not ask? I asked where she would go. And Elias finally looked up. Old eyes. Tired eyes. eyes that had opened too many doors for people leaving pain behind. She said somewhere you could not name her too late. Marcus inhaled quietly. Alexander did not move. The sentence should have angered him. It did. But beneath the anger, something colder opened. Too late. Men only heard those words when a woman had already stopped waiting for earlier. Alexander turned away. She is upset, he said. No one answered. He looked at Marcus. Send riders to the city gates. Quietly. No public alarm. Marcus nodded. Yes, my king. She will not have gone far. Marcus said nothing. Alexander's eyes narrowed. You disagree? His beta chose his silence carefully. That was never a good sign. My king, Marcus said. Clara knows the palace habits. If she meant to be found, she would not have left before the first bell. The words annoyed him because they were logical. She has no family strong enough to hide her. No political allies. No money. Likely little. Then she will come back. The sentence left him before he examined it. She will come back. There. Simple. Solid. A fact dressed as command. Clara would grow cold. Frightened. Tired. She would realize the road was not kinder than the palace. She would return by evening, perhaps pale and angry, perhaps silent in that stubborn way of hers. He would be gentle. He would explain. He would tell her the council had pressed him unfairly. He would say she had misunderstood. Yes, misunderstood. That was the word men used when women understood too well. Marcus looked at him. Not accusingly. Worse. Sadly. Alexander turned toward the window. Do not look at me like that. Like what? As if I lost something. Marcus lowered his eyes. Yes, your majesty. But the look had already done its damage. By noon, the first riders returned. No Clara at the northern gate. No Clara at the western road. No Clara in the palace market. A laundry cart had passed the lower checkpoint with a sick girl in the back, but the guards had not searched deeply. Alexander nearly dismissed the report. Then something stopped him. Sick girl. Auburn hair hidden. Traveling low. He sent men after the cart. By sunset, they returned with nothing but mud on their boots and irritation in their faces. The cart had split from the main road near the old shrine. No clear direction. No witnesses willing to remember. No scent strong enough after morning rain. No scent. That was when the fear became real. Alexander went back to his chambers alone. The bed had been remade. He hated that. The servants had removed the shape of her absence and called it duty. He ordered everyone out, then stood beside the bed and opened his hand. The silver clasp lay against his palm. A small thing. A private thing. A thing no court had seen him give. A thing Clara had returned because she knew exactly what private gifts were worth when public silence followed them. He placed it on the pillow, where she had left it. For the first time, he let himself remember the moment Lord Brenner said, "She was never meant to be queen," and his own silence after it. He had not agreed, he told himself. He had only chosen not to fight that battle at midnight. But women who were never defended did not care what hour a man planned to become brave. Alexander sat on the edge of the bed. The chamber felt enormous without her. That irritated him too. A king's room should not feel empty because one untitled woman had gone. And yet every object seemed to have lost proportion. The chair where her cloak used to hang. The mirror where she braided her hair. The small stack of books on the window seat. The untouched blue robe. He picked up the robe once, then put it down. It smelled faintly of her. Not enough. The door opened softly. Marcus entered without waiting to be invited. Alexander did not reprimand him. That alone told them both enough. Report, Alexander said. Marcus stood near the threshold. No confirmed sighting. She cannot vanish. Marcus did not answer. Alexander looked up sharply. She cannot. My king, she has no training. No protection. Not royal protection. No one would risk hiding her from me. Marcus's face changed. There it was again. That careful sadness. Alexander stood. You have something to say? Say it. Marcus held his gaze. Perhaps someone would risk hiding her because she needed hiding. The chamber went silent. The words should have earned punishment. They earned truth instead. Alexander turned away first. His hand found the silver clasp again. Cold metal. Cold bed. Cold dawn. She misunderstood, he said. The defense sounded weaker in the room than it had in his head. Marcus answered quietly. Did she? Alexander closed his eyes. Behind them, he saw Clara at the door last night. Had she been awake? Had she heard? Had she stood there with those hazel eyes too still? His stomach tightened. She knows I care for her. Yes, Marcus said. Alexander opened his eyes. Marcus continued. But perhaps she left because caring for her in private was no longer enough. Private. The word struck harder than accusation. Alexander looked around the chamber. His chamber. Their chamber. No. His. That had been the problem. Everything Clara had been to him existed here, where doors closed, and men could later call it complicated. A knock sounded. A young guard entered, face pale. Your Majesty. Lady Victoria asks whether the morning council should be delayed due to Miss Bennett's absence. Miss Bennett. Not Clara. Not Lady. Not Luna. Miss Bennett's absence. Alexander looked at him until the boy lowered his eyes. Tell Lady Victoria, he said slowly. There will be no council tomorrow. The guard bowed and fled. Marcus watched him. Alexander did not explain. He did not know what he would have said. That he needed time to think? To search? To understand why the room felt like a verdict? Outside, night settled over the palace. Somewhere beyond the walls, Clara Bennett was moving farther from him with every hour. Alexander looked at the pillow, at the silver clasp, at the empty space beside it. She will come back, he said again. This time, no command lived in the words. Only fear. Marcus heard it. So did Alexander. By midnight, the scent of Clara Bennett had faded from the Alpha King's chambers completely. Only the silver clasp remained. Small, cold, final. And for the first time in his life, Alexander Whitmore began to understand that a woman who left without a word had sometimes already said everything. 7 years taught Clara Bennett that peace was not the absence of fear. Peace was choosing which fears were allowed inside the house. Briar Hollow was small enough that everyone knew when bread burned, whose cow had broken a fence, which widow watered her flowers before sunrise, and which child had lied about stealing pears from Mr. Dutton's tree. It was also small enough to protect secrets by pretending not to see them. Clara lived in the last cottage on Willow Lane, where the road dipped toward the lower woods and the wind smelled of pine after rain. The roof leaked in spring. The floorboards complained in winter. The kitchen window stuck unless lifted with both hands. It was not beautiful. It was hers. No royal marble. No guarded doors. No black sheets smelling of Alpha King Alexander Whitmore. Just a narrow bed, a sewing table, dried herbs hanging from the beams, and a little boy who had learned to walk between baskets of cloth while Clara stitched late into the night. Ethan Bennett was 7 years old. He had his mother's careful hands, his father's gray-blue eyes. That was the part Clara hated looking at in daylight. Not because she hated the eyes. Because some mornings, when Ethan looked up from his breakfast with sleep still soft on his face, Clara would see Alexander before the crown, before the council, before the sentence that had made her leave. Then Ethan would smile, and Alexander would disappear. Ethan's hair was dark blonde, always falling over his forehead no matter how often Clara trimmed it. He was leaner than she had been as a child, quick-footed, quiet in public, too observant for comfort. He knew where Ruth kept the fever herbs. He knew which neighbors paid late because they were poor and which paid late because they were proud. He knew his mother placed every coin twice before spending it once. He knew not to ask about the silver clasp in the locked wooden box beneath Clara's bed. That was what hurt. Children were supposed to ask about forbidden things. Ethan had learned early that some silences had weight. On the morning of his 7th birthday, Clara found him outside near the woodpile, holding both hands around a wounded sparrow. Its wing bent wrong. Its tiny body trembled. Ethan stood very still, eyes narrowed with concentration. Ethan, Clara said softly. He did not look up. It hurts. I know. No, he whispered. I mean, I can feel it. Clara stopped walking. The air changed. The sparrow's trembling eased beneath Ethan's palms. A faint warmth rose, too subtle for human eyes, but not for Clara's wolf senses. Something old and royal moved through the space between child and bird. The same force she had felt once in Alexander's presence when he calmed an entire hall without raising his voice. The same force she had fled before it could name her child as property. Ethan, she said again, sharper this time. The boy startled. The warmth vanished. The sparrow fluttered weakly, then settled. Ethan looked at her, guilty and confused. I didn't hurt it. I know. Then why do you sound scared? Clara crossed the yard and knelt before him. The grass was wet through her skirt. She did not care. I am not scared of you. His brows drew together. That was not an answer. He was old enough to know. Too old for softness to hide truth completely. Clara touched his cheek. Fair skin. Cold from morning air. So much like hers. So much like his. You must be careful when you feel things that are not yours. Ethan looked down at the bird. Is that bad? No, then why hide it? There it was. The question beneath every other question. Why hide? Why not speak? Why do people lower their voices when I ask where my eyes came from? Why does Ruth call me blessed and then look at you like she regrets saying it? Why does Mr. Hobb visit every winter and check the road before knocking? Why do you lock the box under your bed? Clara took the sparrow gently from his hands and placed it in a folded cloth. Because the world does not always protect unusual children, she said. Ethan considered that. Am I unusual? Clara smiled because the alternative was breaking. You are very unusual. He seemed pleased for half a second. Then the thought behind his eyes shifted. Was my father unusual? The yard went silent. Even the sparrow seemed to stop breathing. Clara looked toward the trees. 7 years, and the question still found her unprepared every time it arrived with a new shape. She had never lied to Ethan. She had also never given him enough truth to lead him back to a palace that had not deserved him. Yes, she said. Ethan watched her face carefully. Did he have gray eyes? Clara's hand tightened around the cloth. Yes. Was he strong? Yes. Was he bad? The question was too simple for the answer it required. Clara looked at her son, at his serious face, at the child who deserved a father uncomplicated enough to explain. No, she said slowly. But he made choices that hurt us before you were born. Ethan absorbed that. Did he know about me? There it was. The question she feared most. Not because the answer was hard, because it was merciful to Alexander in a way he had not earned. No, Clara said. Ethan blinked. Clara continued before hope could make the wrong shape in his heart. I left before I told him. Why? The sparrow moved in the cloth. A tiny sound. A life trying to stay. Clara looked down at it. Because I knew that if I stayed, you might be loved in secret. Ethan frowned. What does that mean? It means someone cares for you where no one can see, but does not protect your name when everyone is watching. His mouth turned down slightly. That sounds lonely. Clara closed her eyes for one breath. Yes. Were you lonely? She opened her eyes. Ethan was not asking like a child seeking gossip. He was asking as someone who had found an old bruise on his mother and wanted to know whether touching it would hurt. Yes, Clara said. I was. His face changed. Anger came first. Small. Clean. A child's anger on behalf of the mother who had kept him warm. I don't like him. Clara almost laughed. Almost cried. Did neither. You do not know him. I know he made you lonely. That was enough for a child. Perhaps it should have been enough for everyone. Clara brushed hair from his forehead. He also gave you those eyes. Ethan looked offended. I did not ask for them. This time she did smile. Neither did I. The sparrow fluttered again, stronger now. Ethan looked at it. Can we keep it until it flies? Yes. Does it need a name? Probably. He thought seriously. King. Clara froze. Ethan looked up. What? Why that name? He shrugged. Because it survived. The world tilted for a moment. Not because of the word. Because of how easily fate could speak through a child who did not know what it was touching. Clara stood slowly. King is a heavy name for a sparrow. Then he should learn balance. That sounded so much like something Alexander might have said that Clara had to turn away. She walked toward the cottage, holding the bird carefully. Ethan followed. Inside, Ruth was already at the table with birthday bread, honey butter, and a face that knew more than she ever said. The old midwife had found Clara 7 years ago at the edge of fever and fear, taken one look at her swollen belly months later, and said only, "We will need more blankets." No questions unless questions helped. She looked at the sparrow now. Another rescue? Ethan climbed onto the bench. His name is King. Ruth's eyes flicked to Clara. Only once. Enough. Clara set the bird near the window. Temporary name. Ethan objected. No. Real name. Ruth buttered bread with dangerous calm. Names matter, boy. I know. Clara sat across from him. Do you? She thought. The morning continued with ordinary tenderness. Birthday bread. A small carved wolf from Mr. Hobb, delivered the night before. A blue scarf Clara had sewn from leftover cloth. Ethan pretended not to love it, then wrapped it around his neck immediately. At noon, he ran errands for Ruth and returned with mud on his boots and news from the market. A royal rider passed through, he said, dropping potatoes onto the table. Clara's hand went still on the dough. Ruth's knife stopped. Ethan noticed both. What? Clara forced her fingers to move. Royal riders pass sometimes. Not here. Ruth resumed cutting. What did he want? Looking for wolf disturbances near the lower woods. Mr. Dutton said sheep were torn open 2 nights ago. Clara exhaled slowly. Only wolves. Only sheep. Not her. Not Ethan. 7 years, and still fear knew the fastest path through her body. Ethan leaned against the table. He had the black crest. The knife slipped from Ruth's hand. Clara looked up. Whitmore. Alexander's crest. Ethan's eyes moved between them. You know that crest. Clara wiped flour from her hands. Yes. His voice lowered. Is it his? No one asked which him. They did not need to. Clara looked at the window where the sparrow named King rested in a basket, alive because Ethan had touched what he did not yet understand. Yes, she said. Ethan went very still. Outside, a horse passed slowly along Willow Lane. Not stopping, just passing. Still, Clara rose. She crossed to the curtain and looked through the narrow gap. A royal scout rode past the cottage, cloak dark, crest visible, eyes scanning the lane with official disinterest. He did not know. Not yet. But Ethan stood behind Clara now, blue scarf around his neck, gray-blue eyes fixed on the same rider. The child of the Alpha King, watching his father's world pass by without recognizing him. Clara let the curtain fall. Her heart beat too hard. Ethan spoke softly. If he did not know about me, would he want to? Clara turned. The question was not hope exactly. It was a door. A small one. Dangerous. She knelt before him as she had that morning. I do not know. He looked disappointed. She did not soften it. False certainty was another kind of cage. What if he does not? Then that will be his failure. What if he does? Clara looked at her son. At the eyes Alexander had never seen. At the power beginning to wake beneath his skin. At the life she had carried out before dawn so it could belong to itself before belonging to blood. Then he will have to learn that wanting you is not the same as deserving you. Ethan thought about that for a long time. Then nodded. All right. Children trusted truths they could stand on. Even painful ones. That night, after Ethan fell asleep with the blue scarf still around his neck and the sparrow basket near his bed, Clara opened the locked box beneath hers. Inside lay the physician's note. A few coins from Elias long spent but never forgotten. And the silver memory she had not been able to keep because she had left it behind. No, not the clasp. That remained with Alexander. Inside her box was only the ribbon she had worn in her hair the night before she vanished. Dark blue. Soft. Expensive. Private. She touched it once. Then closed the lid. Outside, somewhere beyond Briar Hollow, royal riders moved through the forest looking for wolves. Inside the cottage, the Alpha King's son slept without a crown, without a title, without a father, and without shame. For 7 years, Clara had protected that. But as the night deepened and a wolf howled beyond the lower woods, she felt the old world drawing nearer. Not because Alexander had found her. Not yet. Because Ethan was becoming too much like him to remain hidden forever. The wolf attack happened 3 nights after the Royal Scout passed through Briar Hollow. It began with sheep screaming. Not wolves. Sheep. That was how Clara knew something was wrong before the village bells rang. Real wolves killed quickly when hunger drove them. They did not make a field sound like a room full of broken doors. Clara woke in darkness with one hand already reaching for the knife beneath her pillow. Beside the small hearth, Ethan sat up on his cot. His gray-blue eyes were wide. Mom, stay inside. The words came too fast. Too sharp. He heard the fear under them. Of course he did. Children raised around secrets learned to hear what adults tried to bury. Outside, another scream tore through the lower pasture. Then a man shouted. Then the bell. Briar Hollow's warning bell swung from the old chapel roof, cracked down one side. Too small for war and too loud for peace. It rang across the village in uneven strikes. Clara threw on her cloak. Ruth's cottage was across the lane. Mr. Dutton's sheep field lay beyond the lower road, near the tree line. Too close. Far too close. Ethan stood and reached for his boots. No, his head snapped up. I can help. You are 7. I helped King. A sparrow is not a wolf. Something dark moved across his young face. Not anger. Instinct. That frightened Clara more than defiance. She crossed the cottage and knelt before him, hands on his shoulders. Listen to me. You will stay here. You will lock the door after I leave. If anyone comes, you hide under the root cellar boards." His mouth tightened. Because of the wolves? Because of the wolves. Because of the crest. Because of the blood in your veins. Because if the wrong man sees what you are, the world will stop pretending not to notice. "Yes," Clara said, a lie shaped close enough to truth. Ethan looked at her. He knew. Not the whole thing. Enough to hate the space between her words. "Mom, promise me." The bell rang again. His eyes flicked toward the window, then back to her. "I promise." Clara kissed his forehead and hated herself for leaving the room with doubt still in his eyes. Outside, Briar Hollow had become lanterns and movement. Men ran with pitchforks. Women pulled children indoors. Dogs barked until one yelped and went silent. Ruth stood in the lane with a medical satchel clutched against her chest, white hair braided down her back like a rope. "You left him inside?" Ruth asked. "Yes." "Good." Neither woman believed good was strong enough. They ran toward the lower pasture. The smell reached Clara first. Blood, wet wool, fear, and beneath it, something rotten. Not ordinary wolf scent. Feral, broken, a rogue, maybe more than one. At the fence line, Mr. Dutton was on the ground, one arm torn open, his son dragging him backward while 3 villagers waved torches at the darkness beyond the field. Something moved between the trees. Low, huge, wrong. Its eyes caught firelight. Clara's wolf rose under her skin in answer, protective and terrified. She had suppressed that part of herself for 7 years, not killed it. It knew danger before thought could name it. Ruth dropped beside Mr. Dutton. Clara grabbed a torch from a boy barely old enough to hold one. "Get back," she said. The boy stared. "Clara, now." Her voice carried more command than she intended. For one heartbeat, the villagers obeyed like subjects. That frightened them. It frightened her too. The rogue lunged. Not fully. A warning strike. It slammed against the fence, jaws snapping, black fur matted with blood, ribs showing through ruined hide. Its scent hit the field in a wave of sickness and rage. Several people screamed. Clara held the torch high, the rogue's eyes fixed on her, then shifted, past her, toward the village, toward Willow Lane. Her stomach dropped. "Ethan." "No," she whispered. The rogue turned and bolted along the fence instead of into the field, toward the cottages. Clara ran. Behind her, Ruth shouted her name. Clara did not answer. Fear stripped the world down to one road, one door, one child. She reached Willow Lane as the rogue crashed through the side fence near her cottage. The front door was open. Open. The word nearly killed her. "Ethan." No answer. The rogue stood in the yard, snarling toward the woodshed. A small figure stood between it and Ruth's neighbor child, little Anna Price, who had fallen in the mud clutching a broken doll. Ethan, barefoot, in nightclothes, knife in one hand. Too small, too still. "Ethan," Clara said, voice breaking. He did not look back. The rogue lowered its head. Anna sobbed. Ethan lifted his free hand. "No," Clara breathed. But the power had already begun. It moved through the yard like pressure before a storm. Not loud. Not visible in the way fire was visible. Stronger than that. Older. The rogue froze. Its growl caught in its throat. Ethan's eyes were no longer only gray-blue. They burned silver at the edges. Royal Alpha command. Raw. Untrained. Impossible. "Stop," Ethan said. One word. A child's voice. The rogue's legs buckled. Clara felt the command strike her own bones. She stumbled, catching herself against the fence. Windows opened along the lane. Faces appeared in darkness. Ruth stood at the corner, pale with horror and awe. The rogue fought the command. Foam gathered at its mouth. Its body shook violently, trapped between madness and bloodline authority older than the village itself. Ethan's arm trembled. He was too young, too untrained. Power poured from him without boundary, and Clara saw the cost in the way his face drained of color. She ran to him. "Ethan, let go. I can hold it." "No, sweetheart. Let go. It will hurt, Anna. I have her." He shook his head, tears standing in his bright silver eyes. "I can feel it hurting. Not the rogue. The wound. The madness. The whole broken animal." Clara reached him and pulled Anna behind her with one arm. The rogue snapped free for 1 second. One terrible second. It lunged. A black arrow from the mud. Clara turned her body over both children. Then a second command hit the yard. Not Ethan's. Adult. Royal. distant but unmistakable. Down. The rogue crashed into the earth, so hard mud splashed across Clara's cloak. Silence followed. Heavy. Stunned. Clara lifted her head. At the far end of Willow Lane, Beta Marcus Hale sat astride a black horse beneath a royal cloak, one hand raised, eyes fixed on the rogue. Behind him were two scouts wearing the Whitmore crest. No, no, no. Marcus dismounted slowly. His gaze moved first to the rogue, then to Clara. Recognition struck him like a blade. 7 years had changed her, made her stronger, fuller, older in the eyes. But not enough. He knew. Clara, he whispered. The lane heard it. Ethan turned toward him. The silver in the boy's eyes faded to gray-blue. Marcus looked at the child and went completely still. Clara felt the moment happen. Not dramatic. Not loud. Worse. Precise. Marcus saw the eyes. The hair. The command. The scent blooming in the cold air now that Ethan's power had torn through every careful cover Clara had built. Royal Alpha blood. Alexander's blood. The Beta took one step forward. Clara moved in front of Ethan. Fast. Automatic. Her knife still in hand. Marcus stopped at once. Good man. Smart man. Heartbroken man. His voice was barely above a breath. Is he? Do not ask that here. Marcus looked around. Villagers stood in doorways. Ruth held Anna against her side. Mr. Hobb, somehow already arrived with a lantern and a shotgun older than dignity, stared at Marcus as if daring him to breathe wrong. Marcus lowered his voice. The rogue needs containment. My men can take it. Take it. And the boy needs a healer trained in alpha blood strain. Clara's jaw tightened. He has me. Marcus's eyes softened. That may not be enough after a command like that. The truth hurt because Clara had already seen Ethan's trembling hands. Behind her, Ethan whispered, Mom? She turned. His face was pale. Too pale. Blood ran from his nose in a thin, dark line. Clara's heart stopped. She dropped the knife and caught him as his knees folded. Ethan. His body was hot now. Burning. The unleashed power had turned inward. Ruth hurried forward, but Marcus was faster, then stopped himself before touching the child. He looked at Clara, asking, even now. That almost broke her. She nodded once. Marcus knelt and placed 2 fingers near Ethan's wrist, not gripping, only feeling the pulse. His face changed. Royal strain fever, he said. Clara closed her eyes. She had feared many things. This was one of them. Ethan's eyes fluttered. Mom, he whispered, did I do bad? No, Clara gathered him against her chest. No, baby. You saved Anna. His small hand twisted in her cloak. I didn't hide. The words cut deeper than any accusation. Because she had asked him to hide all his life, and the first time he did not, everyone saw him. Marcus rose slowly. We need to move him. No palace. Clara, no, my king has physicians who can. No, the word cracked through the lane. The scouts shifted. Marcus lifted one hand, warning them not to move. Clara held Ethan tighter. The boy's skin burned against her. The fever was rising fast. Ruth touched Clara's shoulder. Her old voice was gentle and merciless. Girl, love does not cure blood fever. Clara looked at her. Ruth's eyes were wet. I can help with herbs. I cannot teach royal blood how to settle. Clara wanted to hate her. Could not. Marcus spoke quietly. Not the palace, then. There is a royal way station 2 miles east. Empty except for my men. Secure. No council. No court. Clara looked at him. 7 years collapsed into one impossible decision. Keep Ethan hidden and risk the fever. Reveal enough to save him and invite the world that had rejected her to claim him. Ethan shivered violently in her arms. The choice made itself. Fine, she said. The way station. Not the palace. Marcus nodded. And Marcus? He looked at her. If you send word to Alexander before I agree, I will disappear again with my son even if I have to crawl. The word son landed. Marcus absorbed it with visible pain. Not surprise. Confirmation. I will send word only that a child with royal strain fever needs a physician, he said. No names until you decide. Clara held his gaze. She believed him. That frightened her almost as much as not believing him would have. Within minutes, the rogue was chained and dragged toward the scout wagon. Anna was carried home. The villagers whispered in low, shaken voices, already understanding that they had seen something larger than a wolf attack. Clara wrapped Ethan in her cloak and climbed into Marcus's carriage. Ruth climbed in beside her without asking. Mr. Hobb handed Clara the locked wooden box from beneath her bed. She stared at him. He grunted. Figured we were done pretending. Inside the box lay the physician's note. The ribbon. 7 years of silence. Clara held Ethan in one arm and the box in the other as the carriage began moving toward the Royal Way Station. Through the window, Briar Hollow receded into darkness. The village that had protected them by not asking questions had finally run out of ignorance. Across from her, Marcus sat with his hands clasped tightly, looking at Ethan's sleeping face as if he were staring at the future Alexander had never known he lost. The boy's fevered breath filled the carriage. Soft, uneven, royal. Marcus whispered, almost to himself, "He has his eyes." Clara looked down at her son. "No," she said quietly. "Alexander has his." Marcus said nothing after that. Good. Outside, the first edge of dawn touched the road. 7 years ago, Clara had left before sunrise to keep her child from becoming a secret. Now another dawn was bringing them toward the very bloodline she had escaped. Not because fate was kind, because some truths grew too powerful to stay hidden behind a mother's hands forever. The Royal Way Station smelled like old stone, rainwater, and decisions Clara Bennett had never wanted to make. It stood 2 miles east of Briar Hollow, hidden beyond a line of black pines, built for kings who needed shelter between borders and wars. Small compared to Whitmore Palace, too large for a mother carrying a fevered child in her arms. Marcus opened the carriage door himself. No servant, no announcement, no royal banner raised. Good. Clara stepped down with Ethan wrapped tightly against her chest. His skin burned through the cloak. His head rested beneath her chin, too heavy, too still. 7 years of hiding had made her careful. Motherhood had made her practical. Fear could wait. Fever could not. This way, Marcus said. He did not reach for Ethan. He had learned quickly. Ruth followed with her medical satchel and the expression of a woman ready to bite any royal physician who breathed too proudly. Inside, 2 guards stood near the entry hall. Both looked at Clara, then at the child, then away. Marcus's voice sharpened. No one speaks of what they see here. Yes, Beta. The title struck the room. Beta. Alexander's right hand. Alexander's world. Alexander's shadow reaching Clara at last. She held Ethan tighter. The physician arrived before the fire in the sick room was fully lit. Dr. Samuel Greer was older than Clara expected, with silver hair, tired eyes, and hands that went still the moment he saw Ethan's face. Not the fever, the face. Clara saw the recognition before he buried it. Her voice turned cold. Treat him first. Understand him later. Greer bowed his head. A wise man. Yes, ma'am. Not my lady. Not Luna. Not anything that would trap her inside a title she had not accepted. Ma'am. Clara allowed him close. Barely. He checked Ethan's pulse, his eyes, the heat at the back of his neck, the faint silver thread pulsing beneath the skin near his collarbone. Royal strain fever. The words did not need to be spoken again. Ruth watched from the other side of the bed, arms folded. If you hurt him, she said, I will make your death long and herbal. Dr. Greer blinked. Marcus looked briefly toward the ceiling, as if asking patience from gods who had abandoned him years ago. Clara almost laughed. Almost. Then Ethan whimpered. The sound cut through everything. She sat beside him immediately and took his hand. I'm here. His eyes opened halfway. Silver flickered at the edges. Mom. Yes. Did the wolf come? No. You are safe. He tried to turn his head. Weak. Confused. Anna. She is safe too. His breathing eased for one fragile second, then tightened again. Am I in trouble? Clara's heart cracked cleanly. No, Marcus, standing near the door, closed his eyes. He heard it. Everyone heard it. The child had saved another child, nearly burned himself from the inside, and still his first fear was whether he had done wrong by being seen. No trouble, Clara whispered. Never for saving someone. Ethan's fingers curled around hers. Dr. Greer prepared a dark tonic and a cooling cloth soaked in moonleaf and salt water. This will help draw down the fever, he said. But the command surge was too strong for his age. He needs a stabilizing presence. Clara looked up. No, I did not say the king. You were thinking it. Greer lowered the cup. Silence entered the sick room. Marcus finally spoke. Clara. She did not look at him. No, Alexander's blood may steady him faster. And what will Alexander do when he walks in and sees a 7-year-old boy with his eyes burning royal silver? Marcus's jaw tightened. He will want to save him. Clara looked at him then, her face calm, her voice not. He wanted many things in private. The sentence landed where it was meant to. Marcus looked down. Ruth made a low sound of approval. Dr. Greer, either brave or foolish, said gently. The child may not have time for old wounds to finish speaking. Clara turned on him. He is alive because I listened to old wounds. The physician went quiet. Good. Ethan moved restlessly against the pillow. Heat rolled off him in waves. His small face twisted with pain. He was trying not to show because he had learned that being different frightened his mother. That truth broke her more than Alexander ever had. Clara pressed her lips to his burning hand. I am sorry, she whispered, too softly for anyone but Ethan to hear. I try to make hiding feel like safety. His lashes fluttered. Did it work? A fevered question. A clear one. Clara closed her eyes. No, Marcus turned away. Outside the sickroom window, dawn strengthened behind the trees. 7 years earlier, she had crossed a threshold before sunrise carrying a secret small enough to hide beneath her palm. Now that secret lay before 3 witnesses, burning with royal blood. Clara opened her eyes. Send for him, she said. The room stilled. Marcus looked back. Clara, do not make me say it twice. He nodded once, but she lifted a finger. Not to the palace. Marcus paused. You want him brought here? Yes. No counsel. No counsel. No, Lady Victoria. His expression darkened. She has no place in this. She had a place when men used her name to erase mine. Marcus accepted that. No, Lady Victoria. No announcement. No royal procession. No claim spoken over my son before I permit it. My son, Marcus repeated quietly. Clara's eyes hardened. Yes. Understood. He left. The door closed behind him. Clara exhaled only when his footsteps faded. Ruth came around the bed and placed one weathered hand on her shoulder. You did right. Clara stared at Ethan's face. I do not know what right is anymore. That is usually when it starts costing enough to matter. Dr. Greer gave Ethan the tonic. The boy grimaced even in fever. It's bad, he whispered. Ruth leaned close. Medicine is meant to be bad. Otherwise children would steal it. Ethan's mouth moved faintly. Almost a smile. Clara held on to that almost as if it were a rope. Hours passed. Not many. Enough. The way station settled into the tense quiet before a storm. Guards changed positions. Marcus's men secured every road. Ruth muttered threats at the physician whenever he checked Ethan's pulse too often. Clara did not leave the bedside. At mid-morning, Ethan woke clearer. Not well. Clearer. His eyes opened and found Clara immediately. Mom. I'm here. Where are we? A royal way station. His brow furrowed. Royal like the crest? Yes. His hand tightened in hers. The man from last night knew you. Yes. Is he from him? Clara did not pretend to misunderstand. Yes. Ethan swallowed. The fever had left his lips dry. Is he coming? The room seemed to lean toward her answer. Clara brushed damp hair from his forehead. Yes. Ethan's eyes widened. Fear first, then curiosity, then something worse. Hope he was ashamed to have. Clara saw every piece of it. I did not send for him because he has a right, she said. I sent for him because your body may need the blood you came from. Ethan looked at the ceiling. Does that mean he is my father? Clara's throat tightened. She had imagined this conversation in cottages, under trees, years later, when she had better words. Fate had never cared for timing. Yes, she said softly. Ethan did not cry. He went very still, just as she did when pain arrived too large. Clara hated inheritance for that. Did he know before? No, because you left? Yes. Because he was bad? Clara closed her eyes once. Not for Alexander. For Ethan. No. Because he was careless with me in a way I would not allow him to be careless with you. Ethan turned his head toward her. What if he does not like me? The question was 7 years old. Tiny. Enormous. Clara leaned close. Then he will be the poorest king who ever lived. Ethan looked at her, then whispered, what if I like him? There it was. The fear beneath hers. Not that Alexander would reject him. That he might not. That the child she had protected from secret love might want love from the man she had fled. Clara held his gaze. Then you will like him honestly. And I will not punish you for wanting your father. His eyes filled then. Only then. You won't be sad. I may be sad, she said. But that will be mine to carry. Not yours. Ethan's mouth trembled. He nodded. Then fatigue pulled him under again. Clara sat back slowly. Across the room, Dr. Greer wiped his spectacles. Ruth glared at him until he stopped. Near noon, a horse arrived at speed. Not many horses. One. Clara knew before anyone announced it. The air changed. Old bonds did not die because a woman survived them. They only became scars that knew the weather. Marcus entered first. His face was pale. Behind him stood Alpha King Alexander Whitmore. 7 years did not make him smaller. That angered Clara. He filled the doorway with the same quiet power, the same dark blonde hair, the same gray-blue eyes that now opened in shock as they moved from Clara to the bed. To Ethan, the world narrowed. Alexander did not speak. Good. A lesser man would have said her name first. A selfish man would have demanded answers. Alexander only stared at the child. His face emptied, then broke. Not dramatically. Worse. Silently. Clara rose and stepped between him and the bed. The movement was immediate. A mother's law. Alexander's eyes shifted to her. For the first time in 7 years, Clara Bennett stood before the Alpha King in daylight. Not in his chambers. Not in secret. Not wearing anything he had chosen. Her auburn hair was pinned poorly. Her dress was plain. Her fair face tired from a night of fear. Her body fuller, stronger, shaped by motherhood and work and years he had not been allowed to touch. Alexander whispered, "Clara." The name trembled. She did not. "Your Majesty." The title hit him harder than hatred. His gaze moved over her face, searching for the woman who had once softened whenever he entered the room. She was not there. Or perhaps she was, standing behind the mother who had learned better. Marcus spoke quietly from behind him. "The boy has royal strain fever." Alexander looked back at Ethan. His hand lifted. 1 inch. Clara's voice cut cleanly through the room. "Do not." He froze. The command had no alpha power in it. Only history. That was enough. Alexander lowered his hand. His eyes returned to hers. "Is he mine?" Ruth swore under her breath. Marcus closed his eyes. Dr. Greer suddenly became fascinated by the tonic bottles. Clara smiled. Not warmly. Not cruelly. With 7 years of earned clarity. You do not ask that over his sickbed before you ask whether he is in pain. Alexander went white. The correction entered him fully. He turned toward the bed again, slower this time. "Is he in pain?" "Yes." His jaw tightened. "What does he need?" Dr. Greer answered because Clara allowed it. "Your Majesty." His blood responded to a command surge beyond his age. "Your presence may stabilize the royal strain if you release a controlled bond pressure. No claim. No dominance. Only steadiness." Alexander nodded once. Too quickly. Desperate men mistook obedience for repair. Clara lifted her hand. "He does not know you." Alexander stopped. The words landed between them. "My son does not know you." Not because fate was cruel. Because Clara had left. Because Alexander had slept. Because a clasp on a pillow had been easier to hold than a woman's public dignity. Alexander looked at Ethan. The boy's lashes fluttered. His fevered eyes opened halfway. Gray-blue met gray-blue. Father and son stared at each other for the first time. Ethan whispered, "Are you him?" Alexander's breath stopped. Clara's heart did too. The king took 1 step forward, then halted himself before Clara had to. He lowered to 1 knee beside the bed. Not touching. Not claiming. Lowering. "Yes," he said, voice breaking. "I am." Ethan studied him through fever. "You have my eyes." Alexander's face twisted. "No," he whispered. "You have mine." Ethan frowned weakly. "Mom said you have mine." A sound escaped Ruth. Half sob. Half satisfaction. Alexander looked up at Clara. She did not apologize. He looked back at Ethan. "Then your mother is right." For the first time, something in the room shifted. Not forgiveness. Not peace. A crack where truth entered. Dr. Greer moved closer. "Your Majesty, if you would sit near him and release steady alpha pressure." Slowly. Alexander looked at Clara. Asking. Actually asking. Too late. Still necessary. Clara stepped aside only enough to give him access to the chair near the bed. Not to Ethan. Not yet. Alexander sat. His hands remained visible on his knees. The air changed as he released power. Gentle. Controlled. Warm as banked fire. Ethan's breathing hitched, then eased. The silver flicker beneath his skin softened. Clara hated the relief that flooded her. Needed it anyway. Alexander closed his eyes as if feeling the child's pain through blood. Maybe he could. Maybe that was part of the cruelty. This bond had existed all along. and used because one man had not protected the woman carrying it. Ethan whispered, "It feels quieter." Alexander opened his eyes. Tears stood in them. He did not wipe them away. Good. Clara stood at the foot of the bed, arms folded tightly around herself. Marcus watched from the doorway. Ruth watched everyone. For 1 hour, the Alpha King sat beside the son he had never known, using the power that once ruled armies to lower a child's fever. He did not touch him, did not claim him, did not ask Clara why. That restraint kept the room from breaking. Near sunset, Ethan slept without shivering. Dr. Greer declared the crisis eased. Not over. Eased. Clara remained standing until her knees nearly failed. Alexander noticed. He stood, then stopped, as if remembering he had no right to move toward her. "Clara," he said quietly. She looked at him. 7 years stood between them. A sick child lay beside them. A kingdom waited beyond the walls, still ignorant of the air breathing in a way-station bed. Alexander's voice lowered. "I did not know. I know." The 2 words did not comfort him. They were not meant to. He swallowed. "If I had," no, the word was soft. Final. "You do not get to begin with the version of yourself you might have been if I had handed you the truth after you failed to defend me without it." Silence. Marcus looked down. Alexander took the sentence like a blade he recognized. "You heard us," he said. "Yes." His eyes closed briefly. "Everything. Enough." He opened them. "I was wrong." "Yes." No argument. No royal pride. Only the truth with nowhere to sit. Alexander looked toward Ethan. "Does he know my name?" "He knows you are his father." Pain crossed his face. "Does he hate me?" Clara looked at the sleeping child. "He is 7. Do not make him carry a feeling big enough to satisfy your guilt." Alexander flinched. Good. She was done softening sharp things before giving them to him. Ruth cleared her throat. "The boy needs rest. So does his mother. Kings can be sorry in the hallway." Alexander almost smiled. Almost. Then bowed his head. To Ruth. To the woman who had protected what he had not known existed. "I will be outside." Clara said nothing. He walked to the door. At the threshold, he stopped and looked back once. Not at Clara first. At Ethan. Then at Clara. For 7 years, he had haunted her memory as the man asleep beside a silver clasp. Now he stood awake in a doorway, finally seeing the life that had left with her before dawn. Too late to undo it. Too early to know what fate intended. The door closed softly behind him. Clara sat beside Ethan at last, taking her son's cooled hand in both of hers. He stirred without waking. Outside, the Alpha King remained in the hall. Not commanding. Not leaving. Only standing guard over a door he had no right to open unless she allowed it. And Clara, exhausted beyond pride, lowered her forehead to Ethan's hand and let herself breathe. Fate had brought her back to Alexander's world, but not to his chambers. Never again to his chambers. This time, if he wanted to be near them, he would have to stand in the light and wait. By morning, Ethan's fever had fallen low enough for the room to remember sound. Birds in the pines. Rainwater dripping from the waystation roof. Ruth crushing herbs with unnecessary violence. Dr. Greer whispering instructions to a guard who looked terrified of both the illness and the old midwife. And outside the door, the Alpha King still standing. Clara knew because royal power changed the air even when it tried to be gentle. Alexander had not entered again. That mattered. Not enough. But it mattered. Ethan slept through most of the morning, one hand curled near his chest, lashes dark against cheeks still too pale. The silver flicker beneath his skin had faded, leaving only warmth where fever had been. Clara sat beside him with her fingers resting lightly over his wrist, counting every steady beat. 7 years of hiding had made her alert to pursuit. Last night had taught her a worse fear. A mother could hide a child from men. She could not hide him from his own blood. Near noon, Ethan opened his eyes. Clearer this time. Gray-blue, not silver. Clara's breath left her in a quiet rush. "Hi," she whispered. He blinked. "Did I sleep?" "A little. My mouth tastes like tree bark." "That is Ruth's medicine." Ruth looked over from the table. Tree bark would be insulted. Ethan turned his head slowly and saw Dr. Greer. Then the unfamiliar ceiling. Then Marcus near the window. Memory returned. His face tightened. Where is he? No one pretended not to know. Clara stroked his hair back from his forehead. Outside. Ethan looked toward the door. He stayed. Yes. Why? The question was soft. Careful. Not happy. Not afraid exactly. The kind of question a child asked when hope stood too close and needed to be inspected before being touched. Clara answered with truth. Because you were sick. Ethan absorbed that. Only because I was sick? Clara's heart clenched. Across the room, Marcus looked down. He can answer that himself if you want him to, Clara said. Ethan's fingers tightened around the blanket. Will you stay? Always. That word she could promise. That word belonged to her. Ethan nodded after a moment. Okay. Clara rose and crossed to the door. Her hand paused on the latch. 7 years ago, she had opened a door to leave Alexander asleep behind her. Now she opened one to let him face what he had never earned gently. He stood in the hallway exactly where she had last seen him. No crown. No cloak of ceremony. Only a dark shirt, unshaven jaw, tired eyes, and the kind of stillness men learned after realizing movement could damage what they wanted most. He looked at Clara first, asking without words. She stepped aside. Ethan is awake. He wants to see you. Alexander's face changed. Pain, relief, fear. All of it contained before it could become something the child would have to manage. May I come in? Clara nodded once. He entered slowly. Ethan watched from the bed, half sitting now with pillows behind him. Ruth remained close enough to strike with a spoon. Marcus stood by the window. Dr. Greer suddenly became very interested in his medical notes. Alexander stopped several feet from the bed. Not close enough to touch. Not far enough to seem ready to leave. Good morning, he said. Ethan studied him. You stayed outside. Yes. All night. Yes. Did Mom make you? No. Ethan's eyes narrowed faintly. Why? Alexander swallowed. The room waited. Clara did not help him. He did not look at her for rescue. Good. Because you were ill, he said. And because I should have been near enough to be called long before illness made it necessary. Ethan looked at Clara. She gave nothing away. So he looked back at Alexander. Did you know I existed yesterday? No. Do you wish you did? Alexander's face broke again, but he held himself still. Yes. Would you have come? The question struck everyone. Ruth stopped grinding herbs. Marcus closed his eyes. Clara's hand tightened on the back of the chair. This was the question Alexander could have answered beautifully and falsely. He did not. I do not know what man I would have been 7 years ago if your mother had told me, he said quietly. Ethan frowned. Alexander continued. I want to say yes. I want to say I would have done everything right. But your mother left because I had already failed to do right by her when I had the chance. Ethan absorbed the words slowly. So maybe. Alexander's voice roughened. Maybe. And maybe is not good enough for a child. Clara looked away. Not because the answer was wrong. Because it was finally honest enough to hurt without insulting her memory. Ethan seemed to accept honesty more easily than comfort. Mom said you were careless with her. Alexander looked at Clara once. Not accusingly. Acknowledging. She was right. Were you mean? Sometimes by silence. Ethan thought about that. Silence can be mean? Yes. The boy looked down at his blanket. I know. 2 words. Small. Devastating. Clara crossed the room before she could stop herself and sat beside him. Ethan leaned into her without embarrassment. Alexander saw. Did not move closer. That restraint held the room together. After a moment, Ethan asked, Are you the king? Yes. Do I have to call you your majesty? Alexander's face tightened. No, what do I call you? The answer he wanted nearly killed him. Father. Dad. Anything that belonged to 7 lost years. He earned none of them. What feels true today? Alexander said. Ethan considered. Alexander. Clara closed her eyes briefly. Alexander bowed his head. Then Alexander. The king accepted his own name like punishment. Good. Necessary. A knock came at the door before the silence settled. Marcus opened it only halfway. A guard whispered urgently. Marcus's expression hardened. He looked at Clara, then Alexander. What is it? Alexander asked. The beta stepped inside and closed the door. Word has reached the capital that a royal Alpha command was used near Briar Hollow. Lord Havers is requesting confirmation. Lady Victoria's family has also sent riders. Clara stood. The room sharpened. Alexander's gaze went cold in a way Clara remembered too well. But this time, the cold was not directed at her. Who told them? Marcus's jaw tightened. The scout report mentioned royal strain fever. Someone sent a copy beyond my command. Alexander's hands closed once. Ethan looked between the adults. What does that mean? Clara turned to him. It means people are curious. Ruth snorted. It means vultures smelled blood. Ruth, Clara said softly. No. Let the boy learn what noble curiosity looks like. Alexander looked at Ethan. Then Clara. They will come. Yes, Clara said. They will ask. They will demand. He did not deny it. They will want proof, Marcus added. If the boy is royal blood, they will push for sacred confirmation. Clara felt the old palace walls rise around her, though they were miles away. Men in fine coats. Questions that were not questions. Rooms where her life was discussed in her absence. Only this time, Ethan would be in the center. No, never again. Alexander saw her face. Clara. She looked at him. I will not let them take him. The sentence was immediate. Fierce. Too easy. She stepped closer. You will not let them? He stopped. He heard it after he said it. The ownership. The old king beneath the frightened father. He lowered his eyes. I said that wrong. Yes. Ethan watched them carefully. Alexander corrected himself. I will stand against any claim made over him without your consent. And his, when he is old enough to understand. Ruth muttered, better. Clara did not soften. Consent does not mean asking after the hall is full. No, consent does not mean surrounding us with guards and calling it protection. No, consent does not mean using my son to settle your succession problem. Alexander's face changed. There. She had reached the wound beneath politics. For 7 years, Whitmore had had no heir. Everyone knew it. Lady Victoria's family had pressed harder each season. Counselors whispered about bloodline instability. Houses waited for Alexander to marry visibly, breed visibly, secure visibly. And now Ethan existed. A child. A person. A solution. Clara would burn the crown before she let them turn him into one. Alexander stepped back once. Not from anger. From understanding. He is not my answer to the council, he said. Clara held his gaze. He is my son. Ethan's hand tightened around the blanket. Alexander looked at him, then corrected himself again. He is your son, he said to Clara. And he is a child I fathered. What I become to him depends on what he allows, not what blood proves. The room went silent. Even Ruth had nothing sharp to say. Ethan looked down at his hands, then asked, what is sacred confirmation? Marcus answered carefully. A bloodstone. It reacts to royal lines. Does it hurt? No. Will it tell people I am his? Clara's throat tightened. Yes, she said. Ethan looked at Alexander. Do you want that? Alexander's answer came after a long pause. Yes. Clara's eyes flashed. He lifted a hand slightly. Not because of the council. Not because of the crown. Because I do not want another room full of men to say you are not what you are while I stay silent. The word struck Clara somewhere old. Lord Brenner. She was never meant to be queen. Alexander's silence. Now this. A promise shaped like correction. She hated that it mattered. Ethan looked at Clara. Do you want it? The question almost undid her. Because for once, someone asked her before deciding the shape of her life. Clara sat beside him again. I want you safe. That is not what I asked. He was her son. And unfortunately, perhaps, also his father's. She breathed through the ache. I want no one to be able to call you a secret. Ethan considered that. Then maybe we should show them. Alexander went completely still. Clara turned to him. No, Ethan's face fell. She softened her voice. No, sweetheart. Not today. You are still weak. I do not want them to think I am fake. You are not fake because men have not seen proof. His eyes lowered. That landed. But not enough. Alexander spoke quietly. You do not owe proof while you are sick. Ethan looked at him. Alexander continued. A king who demands strength from a child in pain is not worth obeying. Ruth made a small approving sound. Ethan rested back against the pillows. Tomorrow. Clara's chest tightened. Marcus looked toward Alexander. Dr. Greer said, if his fever remains low, he could travel tomorrow afternoon. But I advise against the palace hall. Too much pressure, too many scents. The Old Moon Chapel, Marcus said. Everyone looked at him. It has a sacred bloodstone. Smaller. Used before the Capitol Hall was built. We can control entry. Clara remembered that chapel. Not fondly. A place near the palace grounds where royal children were marked, heirs blessed, noble marriages witnessed. Still, it was not Alexander's chambers. It was not the council hall. It had doors. And if she chose them, exits. Who would be there? She asked. Marcus answered. You. Ethan. His Majesty. Dr. Greer. Ruth if you want her. Myself as witness. And counsel. Alexander's voice turned hard. No, Marcus hesitated. They will object. Let them. Lady Victoria's family will claim concealment. Alexander looked at Clara. Not away from her this time. Not around her. To her. Then we invite one neutral record keeper, he said. Female. Not from the council. Someone whose testimony cannot be dismissed as mine. Clara studied him. Who? Archivist Helen Ward. Marcus nodded slowly. She is respected. Ruth added. And terrifying. That helped. A little. Clara looked at Ethan. He was exhausted now, fighting sleep while adults shaped the next danger around his bed. Wrong. All of it wrong. Yet hiding had brought them here too. She brushed hair from his forehead. If your fever stays down, we go tomorrow. If at any moment you want to stop, we stop. Ethan nodded faintly. And you stay with me? Always. His eyes moved to Alexander. Can he come? The room stilled. Clara looked at her son, not at Alexander. This had to be Ethan's choice, even if it hurt. Yes, she said. If you want him there. Ethan looked at Alexander. You can come, but you cannot stand too close. Alexander bowed his head. I will stand where you tell me. Ethan seemed satisfied. His eyes closed. Within minutes, he slept. The adults remained silent around him. The shape of tomorrow settled over the room. Sacred bloodstone. Old chapel. No public hall. No council. No hiding. Clara stood and walked to the window. Outside, the way station courtyard was wet with rain. Horses stamped near the stable. Guards kept watch along the pine line. Alexander came no closer. Good. 7 years ago, he said quietly. You left before dawn. Clara did not turn. Yes. Tomorrow, you return in daylight. Her fingers tightened on the window ledge. I am not returning to you. I know. The answer came quickly, then softer. I know that now. She looked back at him. The man in the room was still Alpha King Alexander Whitmore. Powerful, beautiful, dangerous with regret. But there was something else in him now. Not humility complete enough to trust. Only the beginning of a man learning that wanting did not equal deserving. Clara's voice was calm. If anyone tries to claim him before he understands what that means, I will take him and leave. Alexander nodded. If anyone calls him illegitimate, they answer to me. No, she said. They answer to the truth. You are not the truth. You are one witness to it. The correction cut. He accepted it. Yes. And if the stone confirms him? Alexander looked toward the sleeping boy. Pain moved over his face. Then the kingdom learns what I lost. Clara looked at him for a long moment. No, she said. He turned back to her. The kingdom learns what Ethan is. Your loss is not the center of his name. For a moment, Alexander could not speak. Then he bowed his head. You are right. Outside the room, voices rose briefly in the hall as another rider arrived. Marcus went to handle it. Ruth settled into a chair beside Ethan with her arms crossed, prepared to guard sleep like a holy relic. Clara returned to her son's side. Alexander remained near the wall, not seated, not comfortable, not dismissed. For the rest of the day, he stood there unless Ethan woke and asked him to sit. Once, near sunset, Ethan opened his eyes and whispered, Alexander. The king moved instantly, then stopped 2 steps away. Yes. Is the stone pretty? Alexander blinked. A child's question in the middle of bloodline, scandal, regret, and fate. His answer was gentle. Yes. It looks like moonlight trapped inside water. Ethan thought about that. Okay. Then slept again. Clara watched Alexander's face after. He looked ruined by how small the question had been. Good. Let him learn. Children were not heirs first. They were children. They asked about pretty stones while kingdoms sharpened knives around them. That night, after the fever stayed low and the way station grew quiet, Clara opened the locked wooden box Mr. Hobb had brought. Inside lay the physician's note. The blue ribbon. 7 years folded into paper and cloth. She took out the note and held it under the lamp. Pregnant. The first proof. Before scent. Before stone. Before Alexander's tears. Before council law. Before Ethan's eyes had become evidence. Clara folded it again and placed it in her pocket. Tomorrow, men might demand proof. The stone might glow. Witnesses might write. The kingdom might kneel. But Clara Bennett had known first. In a silent room, with one hand over her stomach. When no one had bowed. No one had protected her name. No one had called the child heir. She had carried him out anyway. That would always matter more than the stone. Across the room, Alexander looked at the motion but did not ask what she held. Perhaps he knew. Perhaps he was finally learning that some truths did not belong to him unless offered. Clara sat beside Ethan and watched her son sleep through the last night before the world learned his blood. Her hand rested lightly over his, not holding him down, only there. By morning, fate would open another door. This time, Clara would not pass through it as a hidden woman. She would walk beside her son in daylight. And if Alexander wanted to walk near them, he would do it where everyone could see how far he had to stand. The Old Moon Chapel had not witnessed a royal child in 22 years. That was the first thing Archivist Helen Ward said when she entered. Not good morning. Not your majesty. Not what a strange situation. Only a fact. She was a tall woman in her late 50s with iron-gray hair pinned beneath a black veil, a leather record book beneath one arm, and eyes sharp enough to cut through court perfume. She looked at Alexander first, bowed barely enough to remain legal, then turned to Clara. Her gaze moved once over Clara's plain dress, tired face, and the child standing beside her. Not pity, not judgment, assessment. Then she bowed properly. Ms. Bennett. Clara held her gaze. Not Mississippi, not mistress, not girl. Ms. Bennett. The title was small. It still mattered. Archivist Ward. Helen's eyes flickered with approval. Ethan stood at Clara's side, wrapped in his blue scarf despite the mild afternoon, one hand holding hers, the other tucked into his pocket around the repaired sparrow feather he had insisted on bringing for courage. His fever had broken before dawn, but his skin remained pale. Dr. Greer had allowed travel only after Ruth threatened to describe his funeral herbs in detail if he overruled the boy's mother. The chapel stood beyond the eastern edge of the palace grounds, older than the throne room, built from white stone that had yellowed with time. Ivy climbed the outer walls. The windows were narrow, filled with cloudy glass that turned daylight into something soft and watchful. No crowd waited outside. No banners. No council seated in rows. Only Marcus at the door, Dr. Greer near the side aisle, Ruth beside Clara like a war monument in a shawl, Archivist Ward at the record table, and Alexander standing several steps away from Ethan because Ethan had told him where to stand. Not close. Not far. There. Alexander obeyed. That obedience was one of the few things keeping Clara's breath steady. At the center of the chapel, the sacred bloodstone rested inside a shallow silver basin. It was smaller than Clara had imagined. That angered her. So many lives had been shaped by objects that looked harmless. The stone was pale and translucent, smooth as river glass, with faint white veins beneath its surface. Moonlight trapped inside water, Alexander had said. Ethan stared at it. It looks cold, he whispered. Clara squeezed his hand. You do not have to touch it yet. I know. Do you want to wait? He shook his head, then changed his mind halfway and looked at her. Will it hurt? Before Clara could answer, Alexander spoke from his place. No, Ethan turned. Alexander's voice stayed gentle. I touched one when I was younger than you. It feels like putting your hand in snow that remembers you. Ethan frowned. That sounds weird. It is. Ruth muttered. Royal traditions usually are. Helen Ward wrote something in her book. Clara hoped it was that. Marcus cleared his throat. My king, one matter before we begin. Alexander looked at him. Marcus's face had gone tight. Clara's stomach hardened. What? Lord Havers has arrived at the outer gate with Lady Victoria Ashford and 2 council witnesses. They demand admission. The chapel cooled. Ethan's fingers clenched around Clara's. Alexander's face changed. Not with surprise. With old anger finally meeting a proper target. No, Marcus nodded. I told them the ceremony is restricted. And they claim the verification of a possible royal heir cannot occur without council oversight. Ruth snorted. Vultures brought paperwork. Clara looked at Alexander. This was the test. Not the bloodstone. Not the glowing proof. This. Would he protect the room before it became another place where men discussed her child as if he were not present? Alexander walked to the chapel door. Not fast. Not dramatically. With the calm of a man who knew exactly what his anger was for. He opened it himself. Clara did not follow. But the old chapel carried sound. Outside, Lord Havers's voice rose with polished outrage. Your Majesty, this is highly irregular. A child of uncertain maternal presentation cannot be verified in private. Maternal presentation. Clara felt the words like dirty fingers on her skin. Ethan looked up at her. What does that mean? It means he is being rude with expensive words, Ruth said before Clara could. Alexander's voice answered from outside. The child is not uncertain. His mother is not a presentation, and you will not enter. A silence followed. Then Lady Victoria's voice. Cool. Familiar only from memory and rumor. Alexander, surely you see how this looks. A hidden woman returns with a boy, and now the crown rushes to accept him. Clara closed her eyes once. Hidden woman. Even now. Even in daylight. Alexander's answer came low. Careful, Victoria. I am only saying what the houses will say. No, Alexander said. You are saying what they taught you to say because my silence once made it safe. The chapel went utterly still. Clara opened her eyes. Ethan watched the door. Helen Ward was writing quickly now. Good woman. Lord Havers tried again. The council must protect the bloodline from fraud. Alexander's voice sharpened. The council failed to protect the woman carrying my bloodline from insult 7 years ago. It will not stand near her son today and call him fraud before his hand touches the stone. Her son, not my heir, not my blood. Her son. Clara's fingers trembled once around Ethan's hand. Only once. Outside, no one spoke. Then Alexander said, Marcus, bar the outer gate. Any man who crosses it without Clara Bennett's permission answers to me. Any woman who insults her name answers to the record archivist Ward is keeping. Helen looked up. Accurately, she said loudly. Ruth smiled for the first time in 2 days. A terrible smile. Alexander returned to the chapel. He did not look triumphant. Good. Protection delayed by 7 years was not heroism. It was debt. He stopped in his place. Ethan looked at him. You told them no. Yes. Because Mom said? Alexander's gaze moved briefly to Clara, then back to Ethan. Because I should have said no long before she had to leave. Ethan accepted that with the seriousness of a child weighing whether an adult's answer could stand. Then he turned to Clara. I am ready. Clara's heart tightened. You are sure? No, he looked at the stone. But I want them to stop using words like uncertain. Clara knelt before him. The chapel blurred. Not with tears. Not yet. With too much history pressing against one moment. You are already certain to me. I know. And if the stone does nothing, will you still be my mom? The question almost broke her. Yes. Then it is okay. Children could be merciful in ways that made adults ashamed. Clara kissed his forehead, then stood. Ethan walked toward the basin. Small steps. Not weak. Careful. Alexander did not move. Marcus held his breath near the door. Dr. Greer clasped his hands behind his back. Ruth looked ready to fight the stone if necessary. Helen dipped her pen. Ethan stopped in front of the basin and looked back once. At Clara, not Alexander. Clara nodded. He placed his right hand on the sacred bloodstone. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then the chapel filled with light. Not bright like fire. Deep like moonrise. Silver spread beneath Ethan's palm, then through the veins of the stone, then up into the basin until the old metal rang softly under the pressure of recognition. The windows trembled. The air changed. Every wolf in the room felt it. Clara's knees nearly gave. Royal blood. Not suggested. Not rumored. Not argued. Confirmed. The stone glowed brighter. A thin line of silver rose from it, encircled Ethan's wrist like a bracelet made of light. The boy stared, wide-eyed, afraid and fascinated. Mom, I am here. His eyes turned silver at the edges, but this time no fever followed. No pain. Only recognition settling where secrecy had lived. Archivist Ward's voice cut cleanly through the silence. Recorded before lawful witness. Ethan Bennett, son of Clara Bennett, carries direct royal alpha blood of the Whitmore line. Alexander closed his eyes. The words struck him visibly. Son of Clara Bennett. Not first son of Alexander Whitmore. Not hidden heir of the crown. Son of Clara Bennett. The archivist understood power. Clara would remember that. Outside the chapel, voices erupted beyond the gate. They had seen the light. Of course they had. Sacred blood did not hide politely. Ethan pulled his hand away. The glow remained for 3 slow heartbeats, then faded into the stone. He looked at his wrist. No mark. No chain. He seemed relieved. Then he turned toward Alexander. Does that mean I have to be a prince? Alexander's face changed in a way Clara could not name. Pain. Wonder. Restraint. He lowered himself to one knee, not close enough to touch. No, Ethan blinked. No. It means the blood is true, Alexander said. It does not mean your life belongs to the crown before you understand what the crown asks. Lord Havers shouted something outside. Marcus opened the door just enough to glare. The shouting stopped. Ethan looked at Clara. Do I have to live in the palace? No, Clara said. Her answer came before fear could dress itself as diplomacy. Alexander looked up at her. Not wounded. Not surprised. Only listening. Good. Ethan's shoulders eased. Can I go back to Briar Hollow? Clara stroked his hair. When Dr. Greer says you are strong enough. Ethan nodded. Then, after a pause, he looked at Alexander. Can you visit? The chapel went silent again. Alexander's breath caught. Clara felt her own heart twist. There it was. The cruelty of a child's open door. Not forgiveness. Curiosity. Want. A beginning that did not care whether adults were ready. Alexander did not answer quickly. Thank God. A quick yes would have been greed. A quick no would have been another wound. He looked at Clara first, then back at Ethan. If your mother permits it, and if you still want me to when the time comes. Ethan thought about that. Could you bring Daisy apples? Clara blinked. Alexander looked lost. Daisy, Ruth said, Mayor, bites men who deserve it. Ethan nodded solemnly. She will test you. For the first time in the chapel, Alexander smiled. Small, broken, real. Then I will bring proper apples. The moment should have been tender. That was why it hurt. Clara looked away toward the blood stone, now pale again, innocent as if it had not just opened the future. Helen Ward closed her record book. The confirmation is complete. Marcus stepped closer. My king, the council will demand a statement. Alexander rose. His gaze moved to Clara. No, not to her. To the space between her and Ethan. The place where decisions had to include both. He spoke carefully. The statement will say exactly what the record says. Ethan Bennett, son of Clara Bennett, carries direct royal alpha blood of the Whitmore line. Any further title, residence, education, or succession matter will be discussed when his mother chooses and when the child's health permits. Clara studied him. No claim. No mine. No heir yet. Accurate. Public. Bounded. Add one more sentence, she said. Alexander waited. Clara lifted her chin. He was never hidden because he was shameful. He was hidden because his mother had learned what happened to people this court loved in private and denied in public. The room held its breath. Marcus looked like he had aged 5 years. Helen Ward opened her book again. Alexander went still, then bowed his head. At it. Helen wrote. Slowly. Clearly. Every word. Outside, the noble voices beyond the gate had gone quiet. Perhaps they heard. Perhaps fate finally had decent acoustics. Ethan looked tired now. The light had taken something from him, even without fever. Clara reached for him. He came at once, leaning against her side. Alexander's hand moved instinctively, then stopped. Clara saw it. Ethan saw it too. The boy looked at the hand, then at Alexander. You can touch my shoulder, he said. Clara's breath caught. Alexander did not move immediately. Are you sure? Ethan nodded. Just shoulder. Just shoulder. Alexander stepped closer, slowly, as if approaching a wild creature, as if approaching a miracle. His hand settled lightly on Ethan's shoulder. Not gripping, not claiming, only there. Ethan stood very still, then did not move away. Alexander's eyes filled. He looked at Clara. She did not soften, but she did not stop it either. That was all she could give. That was more than he had earned. Ruth wiped her eye and blamed dust loudly. Dr. Greer pretended to agree. The chapel door opened again. Marcus turned sharply, but this time it was only a young female guard. Beta Hale, she said, pale. Lady Victoria is at the outer gate. She asks to speak to Ms. Bennett. Clara almost laughed. Almost. 7 years ago, Victoria's name had stood in the room where Clara was erased. Now Victoria waited outside a locked gate asking to speak. Fate had strange manners. Alexander's expression darkened. No, Clara lifted a hand. Everyone looked at her. I will hear what she wants. Alexander turned to her. You do not have to. I know. That was why she could choose. Ethan looked up. Do I have to? No. Clara said immediately. Good. Ruth took his hand. Come sit before your royal blood knocks you over and makes me work. Ethan obeyed. Alexander remained near Clara. Not beside. Near. When Victoria entered, she wore pale gray riding silk and a face trained to look calm in rooms where power shifted. She was beautiful in a cold way, tall and fine-boned, with blonde hair braided perfectly beneath a pearl clasp. Her eyes moved to Ethan, then the stone, then Clara. For the first time, Lady Victoria Ashford had to look at the woman who had once been described as an inconvenience. Ms. Bennett, Victoria said. Clara waited. No curtsy. No rescue from silence. Victoria's mouth tightened. I did not know there was a child. No, Clara said. You did not. If I had known, Clara cut her off softly. Do not begin with the woman you might have been if someone else had given you a better chance to be decent. Alexander looked at the floor. The sentence had already been used on him. Now it stood in the room again, sharpened by repetition. Victoria inhaled. Then, to her credit or pride, accepted the blow. You are right. Clara did not expect that. Neither did Alexander. Victoria looked toward Ethan again. He is innocent. Yes. The houses will not be gentle. No, Victoria turned back to Clara. My family will push to discredit you first. Then, if they fail, they will push to take him into palace custody for education. Alexander's power flared. Clara did not look at him. Why tell me? Victoria's face shifted. For the first time, something tired appeared beneath the polish. Because 7 years ago, men used my name to erase yours. I benefited from that, even without wearing the crown. I will not let them use my name to frighten your son now. Silence. Ruth looked annoyed to respect her. Clara studied Victoria carefully. This was not apology enough. Nothing was. But useful truth did not need to be pure to matter. What do you want? Clara asked. To withdraw my family's marriage petition publicly, Victoria said, and to testify that the council knew of your position in His Majesty's private life before they called you a fraud. Alexander's jaw tightened. Clara's heart gave one hard beat. Public. There it was again. The only language that could answer years of secrecy. Clara looked at Alexander. His face was pale, but steady. He knew what that testimony would do. Not to Clara. To him. To the myth of his honor. To the court's polished version of those years. Good. Will you allow it? Clara asked. The old Alexander might have bristled at that word. Allow. This one only answered. Yes. Victoria looked at him. Something final passed between them. Not love. Not even regret. The closing of a door other people had tried to build into a throne. Clara looked back at Victoria. Then testify. Victoria bowed her head. Not deeply. Enough. She left without speaking to Ethan. Clara respected that most. When the door closed, the chapel felt larger. Ethan had fallen asleep in Ruth's chair, mouth slightly open, one hand still tucked into his pocket. A royal heir, exhausted by adults. Clara crossed to him and brushed his hair from his forehead. Alexander stood a few feet behind her. Clara, he said quietly. She did not turn. What? The statement will go out today. Yes. And after that? She looked at her son. After that? The words contained palace rooms, noble threats, school choices, guards, names, inheritance, fear, curiosity, Alexander's visits, Ethan's questions, and all the unfinished grief lying between her and the man behind her. After that was too large for one afternoon. After that, Clara said, Ethan rests. Alexander said nothing for a moment. Then, and you? Clara turned then. 7 years ago, she had left his chambers before dawn because his silence had told her exactly where she stood. Today, she stood in an old chapel where the stone had named her child in light, where the archivist had written her name first, where the Alpha King had denied the council entry, and where a woman once used to erase her had offered public testimony. It did not heal everything. It did not erase the chamber, but it returned the shape of her dignity to the world that had tried to make her invisible. I decide, she said. Alexander bowed his head. Yes. No argument. No plea. No claim. Outside, the palace bells began to ring. Not celebration. Announcement. The kingdom would know before sunset. Ethan Bennett existed. Clara Bennett had carried him. Alexander Whitmore had failed to protect her name once. And the secret that left through a servant door 7 years ago had returned through the chapel in daylight, shining too brightly for any man to call it this again. By sunset, the kingdom knew Ethan Bennett existed. Not as rumor. Not as scandal whispered through servant halls. Not as a mistake wrapped in careful language. As record. Archivist Helen Ward's statement crossed Whitmore territory before the evening bells finished ringing. It went first to the council hall, then to the noble houses, then to the royal archives, then outward by sealed riders whose orders were written in Alexander Whitmore's hand. Ethan Bennett, son of Clara Bennett, carries direct royal alpha blood of the Whitmore line. The second sentence traveled slower, because men disliked sentences that named their shame. He was never hidden because he was shameful. He was hidden because his mother had learned what happened to people this court loved in private and denied in public. By nightfall, no one in the capital was speaking of border taxes. No one cared about trade routes. No one cared about rain damage on the Eastern Road. Every candlelit room in the noble quarter had Clara's name in it. Some said she had trapped the king. Some said she had saved the bloodline. Some said she had kept the heir from his rightful place. Some, quieter and therefore more dangerous, asked why a woman who had supposedly meant nothing had carried the king's child beyond the palace walls without anyone noticing until the boy was 7. Alexander heard the reports in the council chamber. He stood at the head of the long black table where men had once used the word this and thought it would remain buried beneath royal convenience. Lord Havers sat 2 seats down, pale with controlled fury. Lady Victoria Ashford sat opposite him, not beside Alexander, not behind her family, opposite. That choice alone had set every nobleman's teeth on edge. Marcus stood near the door. Helen Ward sat with her record book open, pen ready, expression bored in the terrifying way of women who had spent decades watching powerful men lie badly. Alexander placed one hand on the table. No one will approach Clara Bennett or Ethan Bennett without permission. Lord Havers's mouth tightened. With respect, Your Majesty, if the boy carries royal blood, the council has an obligation. To what? Alexander asked. The room fell quiet. Havers blinked. Alexander's voice stayed calm. That made it worse. To protect him, he continued. You had 7 years to become men worthy of protecting what mattered in this kingdom, and you spent those years pressuring me toward a public wife while ignoring the woman I had already dishonored in private. Havers went red. Victoria looked down at her folded hands. Not ashamed enough, but not untouched. My king, Havers said. Miss Bennett chose to leave. Alexander's eyes sharpened. Miss Bennett. The correction struck the table. Havers swallowed. Miss Bennett chose to leave. Yes, Alexander said. And this council will speak of that choice accurately. She left after hearing men in my private chamber say she was never meant to be queen while I failed to correct them. Silence. No one moved. The truth had weight when a king stopped hiding behind the throne. Alexander looked at Helen Ward. Record that. Helen's pen moved. Havers's face shifted from anger to alarm. My king, surely internal conversations. Record it, Alexander repeated. Helen did. Each scratch of the pen sounded like a door locking behind the past. Victoria lifted her chin then. My family's marriage petition is withdrawn. Her uncle, Lord Ashford, turned sharply. Victoria. She did not look at him. I will submit testimony that the council knew of Clara Bennett's private position in the king's life and permitted language that reduced her standing while benefiting from the uncertainty. The room erupted. Not loudly. Nobles rarely erupted loudly when their guilt wore expensive fabric. But voices rose. Chairs shifted. Havers said, This is unnecessary. Helen Ward did not pause writing. Alexander almost admired her. Almost. He looked at Victoria. For 7 years, her name had sat between him and Clara like a polished blade. It would have been easy to blame Victoria. Easy, and false enough to be useless. Victoria had benefited from the silence. But Alexander had created it. He would not purchase absolution with a woman's convenient villainy. Your testimony will be accepted, he said. Lord Ashford stood. Your Majesty, you risk destabilizing the houses over a woman who abandoned the palace. Alexander's power moved through the room. Not wild. Not theatrical. Controlled enough to make every wolf lower his eyes. Say abandoned again, he said softly, and you will finish the sentence from outside my borders. Ashford sat. Good. Alexander looked around the council table. The child is not to be addressed as heir until his mother consents to succession discussions and his health permits instruction. He is not to be removed from her care. He is not to be summoned to court. He is not to be inspected like livestock under noble suspicion. One older counselor, Lady Marin, who had said nothing all evening, finally spoke. And if the houses demand access? Alexander turned to her. Then the houses learn patience. Lady Marin nodded once. The first honest approval in the room. Alexander continued. Any house spreading claims of fraud after sacred confirmation will lose court access for 1 year. Any man implying Clara Bennett fabricated or concealed royal blood for advantage will present proof before Archivist Ward and myself. Without proof, he will publicly retract. Helen looked up. And any woman? Alexander paused. Good. Fair correction. Any person, he said. Helen resumed writing. Marcus's mouth moved slightly. Not a smile. Close. The council meeting ended without agreement. That was fine. Agreement from men losing control was rarely necessary. Orders mattered. Records mattered. Consequences mattered. When the chamber emptied, Alexander remained alone with Marcus and Helen. Victoria had left without asking for private audience. That, too, mattered. Helen closed her book. Your Majesty. Alexander looked at her. Yes. You understand that entering this into official record damages your reputation. Marcus shifted. Alexander did not. My reputation survived too much silence. It can survive truth. Helen studied him, then stood. Good. Truth is easier to archive. She left. Marcus waited until the door closed, then said quietly, Clara will hear of this. Alexander looked at the table. Yes. Do you want her to? The old answer would have been yes. Let her know. Let her see. Let the truth travel back to her as proof he had changed. The honest answer was more difficult. I want the court corrected whether Clara praises it or not. Marcus nodded. That is better. Alexander almost laughed. Almost. Your standards are generous. No, Marcus said. They are newly disappointed. That deserved anger. Alexander found none. He looked toward the window, where night had covered the palace grounds. Somewhere beyond the old moon chapel, Clara and Ethan were at the way station under guard he had not chosen without asking. He wanted to go there. He wanted it so strongly his body ached. To see the boy breathing. To see Clara's face when she learned the council had been forced to record what happened. To ask whether she was all right. To ask whether he could stand closer tomorrow. Wanting, he had learned, was not permission. Send the record to Clara, he said. Through Ruth, not directly from me. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Ruth? She will decide whether to hand it over, burn it, or hit someone with it. That sounds accurate. Alexander looked at him. And send a note. One sentence. Marcus waited. Alexander chose carefully. Not apology as hook. Not guilt as leash. Only information. She may decide what is done with the record next. Marcus nodded. At the way station, Clara received the transcript 2 hours later. Ruth brought it and tucked beneath a tray of soup, as if hiding official documents under food was an old and respectable profession. Ethan was asleep again. Fever gone, but exhaustion still heavy in his small body. Dr. Greer had left strict orders for rest, and then retreated before Ruth could improve on them with threats. Clara sat beside the bed when Ruth placed the papers in her lap. From the palace, Ruth said. Clara's fingers stilled. From him. Through Marcus. With a note. Clara unfolded it. She may decide what is done with the record next. No, my dearest Clara. No, I hope you see. No, please believe me. Only decision returned to her hands. Clara hated that it was correct. She read the council transcript slowly. Every sentence. Every correction. Ms. Bennett. She was never meant to be queen. Record that. The child is not to be inspected like livestock. Her throat tightened despite herself. Not because Alexander had become noble in one day. Because the room that once erased her now held evidence of its own cruelty. On paper. In official ink. No whisper could undo that completely. Ruth watched her. Well, Clara kept reading. Victoria's testimony. Marriage petition withdrawn. Council knowledge acknowledged. No private inspection. No succession without maternal consent. Maternal consent. She read those words twice. Then folded the record carefully. Ruth sat beside her. Does it make it better? Clara looked at Ethan. His face was softer in sleep. Child again. Not heir. Not proof. Not scandal. No, Ruth nodded. Does it make it less alone? Clara closed her eyes. That was different. 7 years ago, she had carried the truth alone because no room in the palace had been safe enough to hold it. Now the record held a piece of it. Publicly. Imperfectly. Late. But outside her body at last. Yes, she whispered. A little. Ruth reached over and squeezed her knee. Not gently. Comfort from Ruth always had the force of a warning. Do not let a little become enough too soon. Clara smiled faintly. I know. Across the room, Ethan stirred. Mom. Clara was beside him immediately. I'm here. His eyes opened. Sleepy. Clear. Did the stone tell everyone? Clara brushed hair from his forehead. Yes. Are they mad? Some are. Why? Because some people do not like truth when it arrives without asking their permission. Ethan thought about that. Is Alexander mad? No, did he leave? The question came too quickly. Clara looked at him. No. He is at the palace. Is that leaving? She took a breath. Children deserved precise truth. Not this time. Ethan accepted that, then saw the papers in her lap. What are those? A record. About me? And me? And him? Yes. Can I read it? When you are stronger. He frowned. Does it say I am real? Clara's heart broke in a quieter place than before. She took his hand. You were real before any stone, paper, king, or council said so. Ethan looked at her. Then why does everyone need papers? Ruth muttered. Because adults ruin simple things. Clara leaned down and kissed Ethan's forehead. Because the world is not always wise enough to recognize what mothers know first. That answer satisfied him enough to close his eyes, but not enough to sleep. After a moment, he asked, Can Alexander come tomorrow? Clara went still. Ruth did not speak. That was rare. Do you want him to? Clara asked. I want to ask him about the stone. Only the stone? Maybe. Maybe not. Children often placed large needs inside small subjects. Clara nodded. I will allow a visit tomorrow if Dr. Greer says you can receive one. Ethan's mouth curved faintly. Ruth scares Dr. Greer. She scares everyone. I heard that, Ruth said. You were supposed to, Ethan whispered. Clara laughed. A small sound. Unexpected. It startled her. Ethan smiled with his eyes closed. That was the moment Alexander missed. Good, Clara thought. Then felt the old ache sharpen. Not because she wanted him there. Because some moments proved exactly what absence cost. The next afternoon, Alexander came to the way station without procession. One horse. Marcus behind him. No royal announcement. No guards crowding the door. He waited in the hall until Ruth decided to let him sweat, then opened the door with a glare. 10 minutes. Alexander bowed his head. Thank you. Do not thank me. Behave. Yes, ma'am. Ruth blinked, then stepped aside. Clara sat by the window with the council transcript folded on her lap. Ethan was propped up in bed, blue scarf around his neck, the sparrow feather on the blanket. Alexander entered and stopped where Ethan had told him to stand the day before. Hello, Ethan. Ethan studied him. Hello, Alexander. The name still hurt. Alexander accepted it. How do you feel? Like Ruth's medicine is trying to kill me slowly. Ruth shouted from the hall. I can hear royal slander. Ethan smiled. Alexander did too. Carefully. Your mother said you had questions about the stone. Ethan nodded. Did yours glow? Yes. What color? Silver and blue. Mine was silver. It was. Does that mean I am less royal? Alexander's expression changed. Clara's hand tightened around the transcript. No, Alexander said. It means the stone answered you in your own way. Ethan considered. Did people clap when yours glowed? Yes. Did they clap for mine? Alexander's face went still. Outside the old chapel, the council had shouted. Inside, no one had clapped. Because everyone had been too stunned, too wounded, too aware. No, Alexander said softly. Ethan looked down. They were scared. Some were. Of me. Clara rose slightly. Alexander answered before she needed to. Of what your truth changes. Ethan frowned. That sounds like grown-up fear. It is. Do I have to care? Alexander's eyes warmed with pain. Not today. That was a good answer. Clara hated that she noticed. Ethan touched the sparrow feather. If I am royal, do I have to live in a palace? No. Do I have to learn swords? Only if you want to. Do I have to like Lady Victoria? Clara's eyebrows lifted. Alexander blinked. Ruth snorted somewhere outside the door. No, Alexander said. Good. Alexander almost smiled. Have you met her? No. But Mom gets quiet when people say her name. Silence entered the room. Clara looked away. Alexander did not. She was part of a painful time, he said carefully. But your mother's quiet is not your responsibility. Ethan looked at Clara. She nodded. He relaxed slightly, then asked the question that mattered. Why did you not make them say sorry to Mom 7 years ago? Alexander's breath stopped. Clara turned back. Her first instinct was to protect Ethan from the weight of asking. Her second was to protect Alexander from answering. She refused both. Alexander sat slowly in the chair several feet from the bed. Only after Ethan did not object. Because I was a coward in a way powerful men often hide well, he said. Ethan stared. Alexander continued. I thought not choosing clearly would keep everything from breaking. I thought silence was control. It was not. It hurt your mother and made her stand alone in a room where I should have stood with her. Ethan's brow furrowed. Were you scared? Yes. Of Mom? No, of me. I did not know you existed. Of Lady Victoria? No, then what? Alexander looked at Clara, only for 1 second, then back at Ethan. Of losing what the crown expected me to be. Ethan absorbed this with the severe patience of children listening to adults explain stupidity. That is a bad reason. Alexander bowed his head. Yes. Ethan seemed satisfied, then looked at Clara. Is that why we left? Clara's voice was soft. One of the reasons. What was the other? She stood and crossed to the bed. She could have delayed. She did not. Because I was pregnant with you, and I would not let you be loved only behind closed doors. Ethan looked at her, then at Alexander. Would you have done that? Alexander's eyes closed briefly. When he opened them, he was pale. I do not know. And because I do not know, your mother was right to protect you. The room changed. Not healed. Never that easily. But something settled. A truth placed where a child could step on it without falling through. Ethan nodded slowly. Okay. Ruth appeared in the doorway. 10 minutes. It had been more than 10. No one corrected her. Alexander stood. May I come again? Ethan looked at Clara, then back at him. Tomorrow, if I am not tired. Alexander nodded. Tomorrow, if you are not tired. As he turned to leave, Ethan said, Alexander? He stopped. Yes. Did they clap for Mom? Clara froze. Alexander looked at her, then at the folded record in her lap. No, he said. Ethan frowned. They should have. Alexander's eyes filled. Yes, he whispered. They should have. After he left, Clara stood by the window for a long time. The afternoon light fell across the transcript, across Ethan's blanket, across the room where the Alpha King had answered questions without demanding comfort for the pain of his own answers. Ruth came to stand beside her. Careful, the old woman said. Clara did not pretend not to understand. I know. Honest regret is still regret, not repair. I know. But outside, Alexander mounted his horse and waited for Marcus before leaving. He did not look back at the window. He did not try to catch Clara watching. He simply went. That restraint, like all the others, added itself to the dangerous little pile of evidence Clara did not yet know what to do with. Inside the bed, Ethan closed his eyes and whispered, half asleep, they should clap for Mom. Clara sat beside him, took his hand, and for the first time since returning to Alexander's world, she allowed herself to imagine a future where her son's truth did not require her erasure. Not forgiveness, not return, not love, only that. A life where Ethan could carry royal blood and still belong first to himself. A life where Clara Bennett's name stood before his in the record because she had been the one who stayed. The kingdom had learned Ethan existed. Now it would have to learn that existing did not mean being claimed. And Alexander, if he wanted even a place at the edge of their lives, would have to learn the same lesson one visit at a time. On the third visit, Ethan asked Alexander Whitmore to bring apples. Not royal apples. Not palace fruit wrapped in cloth and carried by a servant. Normal apples, Ethan said from the waystation bed, still pale but sitting upright now. For Daisy. Alexander stood near the foot of the bed where he had been allowed to stand. Daisy is the mare. Ethan nodded. She bites men who hold apples wrong. Ruth, sewing near the window, said, sensible animal. Alexander accepted that without defense. I will bring normal apples. No gold basket. No gold basket. No servant carrying them like they are important. They are important, Alexander said. Ethan frowned. Alexander corrected himself. But I will carry them myself. That satisfied him. Clara watched from the chair beside the bed, hands folded over the council transcript she had still not decided where to keep. Every visit had been like this. Small, careful, full of ordinary questions standing over wounds too deep to name every hour. Ethan asked about the sacred stone, about the palace stables, about whether kings ate soup, about whether Alexander had ever fallen off a horse. Alexander answered everything, honestly enough to be useful, softly enough not to demand trust. He did not ask Ethan to call him father. He did not ask to touch him unless Ethan offered. He did not look at Clara as if every correct answer should be added to a scale in his favor. That was the part Clara distrusted most. Not because it was wrong, because it was right. And right things arriving late had a dangerous way of making the past feel negotiable. It was not. When the physician finally allowed Ethan to sit outside in the courtyard, Alexander asked permission before moving the chair. Ethan looked at Clara, then back at him. You can carry the chair. Not me. Alexander nodded. Chair. Not you. Ruth muttered. Look at that. A king learning nouns. Ethan smiled. Alexander carried the chair into the courtyard himself, placed it beneath the pine shade, and stepped back. Clara noticed his hands. They were steady. They had not been steady the first time he saw Ethan. The courtyard smelled of wet stone and crushed pine needles. Sunlight moved in broken pieces across the ground. Marcus stood near the gate, speaking quietly with two guards. No banners flew. No court carriage waited. No noble visitor had been allowed beyond the outer road since the confirmation. That peace was not natural. It had been enforced. By Alexander's orders. By Marcus's vigilance. By Helen Ward's record. By Victoria's testimony spreading like a clean wound through the court. Clara knew because Ruth heard everything. The council had begun dividing into three groups. Those who wanted Ethan immediately named heir. Those who wanted Clara discredited first. And those wise enough to be silent until they knew which direction power would fall. Clara hated all three. Ethan sat under the pine with a blanket over his knees. Alexander stood 3 paces away with a small cloth bag in his hand. Ethan pointed at it. Are those the apples? Yes. You brought them early. I did. Daisy is in Briar Hollow. I know. Then why bring them here? Alexander looked at the bag, then at Clara. Only briefly. I thought if I promised apples, I should bring apples before asking for anything else. Ethan considered this. That makes sense. Clara looked away. It did. That was the trouble. A messenger arrived before noon. Marcus intercepted him at the gate, read the note, then walked toward Alexander with a face Clara had learned to distrust. Alexander saw it too. He did not step away from Ethan. Marcus stopped at the edge of the courtyard. My king. Alexander's jaw tightened. Say it here. Marcus glanced at Ethan. Then Clara. Alexander understood. He looked at Ethan. This may be court business. Do you want me to step away? Ethan's fingers tightened on the blanket. There. The old fear. Departure wearing polite clothes. No. Ethan said after a moment. Say it here. Marcus looked to Clara. She nodded once. The council has filed a formal petition, Marcus said. They want Ethan transferred to the palace for royal education until succession status is settled. Ethan went very still. Clara rose. The courtyard changed around her. Pine shade. Stone wall. A child in a chair. A king with apples in his hand. And men somewhere far away writing polite words for taking a boy from his mother. Alexander's face went cold. But Clara spoke first. No, one word. 7 years old. Older. Marcus lowered his head. I expected your answer. Alexander looked at him. Who signed it? Havers. Ashford did not. Lady Marin refused. 7 lesser lords signed. Rejected. Marcus's eyes flicked to Clara. Alexander caught himself. Then turned to her. I will reject it if that is also your decision. Clara held his gaze. Not softening. Measuring. It is. Alexander looked back at Marcus. Reject it. Publicly. Marcus nodded. Clara stepped closer. Not only reject it. Alexander waited. Good. Answer the assumption beneath it, she said. They think royal blood gives them access to my child. Alexander's eyes sharpened. Yes. Then make the response about access. He nodded slowly. The council has no right to Ethan's body, residence, education, or time without consent. And do not write maternal consent like I am a gatekeeper to your property. A flicker of pain crossed his face. He deserved it. No, he said. I will write that Ethan's guardianship rests with his mother, Clara Bennett, and no royal claim exists outside her legal custody unless Ethan himself petitions when grown. Marcus's eyebrows rose. That was more than Clara had expected. It was also correct. Dangerously correct. Ethan looked between them. Are they trying to take me? Clara turned at once. The question had gone small. Not because he did not understand. Because he did. She knelt beside his chair. They are trying to act as if your blood matters more than your home. His eyes moved to Alexander. Do you agree with them? Alexander lowered himself to one knee too. Not close enough to crowd. Enough to meet his height. No, but you are the king. Yes. So you can say no. I can say no. I will say no. And I will make sure the law says no when I am not in the room. Ethan thought about that. What if another king says yes later? Silence. A child's question had crossed farther than any council debate. Alexander looked at Clara, then back at Ethan. Then we write the law clearly enough that even another king has to break it openly. Ethan's brow furrowed. Can kings break laws? Yes. Then why have laws? Ruth answered from the window seat. So we know who the villains are when they do. Ethan accepted this as Ruth's wisdom. Alexander did too. Marcus almost smiled. Almost. The petition was rejected before evening. Not quietly. Alexander sent the response by royal seal and ordered copies posted in the Capitol Square, the Council Hall, and every major house archive. Ethan Bennett remains under the sole guardianship of Clara Bennett. No council, crown official, noble house, military authority, or royal claimant may remove, summon, confine, educate, inspect, or present him without consent from Clara Bennett and, where appropriate, the child himself. Royal blood does not erase maternal custody. The crown exists to protect children, not consume them. When Clara read the copy, she had to sit down. Ruth stood behind her, reading over her shoulder. Well, the old woman said. The man found a spine and a pen. Clara did not laugh. Her eyes burned instead, because 7 years ago, the crown had taken her dignity by omission. Today, that same crown had written her authority into law. Not as gift, as admission. There was a difference. Alexander came to the sick room after the decree was posted. He did not enter until Ethan called him in. Ethan was sitting at the small table now, drawing Daisy with teeth too large and a crown tilted on her head. Alexander saw the drawing. Should I be concerned? Yes, Ethan said. She is judging you. I assumed. Clara stood near the window, the decree folded in her hand. Alexander looked at it, then at her. I used your name, he said. Yes. If you object to the language, I will amend it. She looked down at the words again. Sole guardianship of Clara Bennett. Not mistress. Not hidden woman. Not convenient affection. Mother. Guardian. Named. It is correct, she said. His shoulders eased by 1 degree. Only one. Good. Thank you, he said. Clara's eyes lifted. For what? For making me write the right thing instead of the almost right thing. She looked at him for a long moment, then said, Do not thank me for teaching you how not to take my son. The words cut. They were meant to. Alexander bowed his head. You are right. Ethan looked up from his drawing. Mom is usually right. Ruth called from the hall. Always. Clara sighed. Not always. Ethan gave her a look of patient disbelief. Alexander's mouth moved. Not quite a smile. For one breath, the room almost felt ordinary. That frightened Clara more than the council petition. Ordinary was seductive. Ordinary made women forget the locked boxes under their beds. Later that evening, Ethan asked to walk to the waystation garden. Dr. Greer allowed 10 minutes. Ruth allowed 7. Ethan negotiated 9. They settled on 8 because Marcus looked confused and no one trusted a man with military timing in medical matters. Alexander walked behind them, carrying the blanket because Ethan allowed it. Clara walked beside her son. The garden was small, mostly herbs and wet gravel paths. Moonflowers had opened early along the wall, pale against the dusk. Ethan stopped beside them. Do these grow at the palace? Yes, Alexander said. Did Mom see them there? Alexander went still. Clara looked at the flowers. The palace garden had moonflowers. She had seen them only from windows. Women kept in private chambers rarely walked royal gardens at night without being watched. Yes, she said. From far away. Ethan looked at Alexander. Why far away? Alexander did not answer fast. Good. Fast answers were usually shields. Because I kept your mother close to me in the wrong rooms, he said. And too far from the places where she should have been welcomed. Ethan touched a moonflower petal. That is stupid. Yes. Did you think it was romantic? Clara's lips parted. Ruth, who had followed despite pretending not to, made a strangled sound. Alexander looked completely undone. Then, to his credit, answered. At the time, I think I called it private. Ethan wrinkled his nose. Private is when I hide sweets from Ruth. Not people. Ruth gasped with theatrical betrayal. You hide sweets. Ethan ignored that. Alexander's eyes filled again. He looked at Clara, not asking forgiveness. Only acknowledging the child had found the cleanest language for his sin. Not people, he repeated softly. The moonflowers moved in the evening wind. For a moment, Clara saw the old palace window, her younger self standing behind glass, waiting for Alexander to finish with counsel, waiting to be wanted after the public world no longer needed him, waiting in beautiful rooms that had never been hers. Then she saw Ethan beside her, alive, named, protected by law now, asking questions no court could polish. The two images did not fit together anymore. Good. That meant she had survived. When the 8 minutes ended, Ruth announced time with the authority of a death bell. Ethan groaned but obeyed. Halfway back to the door, he stumbled. Alexander moved instinctively. So did Clara. Alexander stopped first. Let Clara reach him. Ethan noticed. So did she. She helped Ethan steady himself. You all right? Tired. Alexander held out the blanket, not touching him. Ethan took it. Thanks, Alexander. The name no longer sounded like punishment only. It sounded like a place marker. Temporary. Honest. Alexander accepted it. That night, after Ethan fell asleep, Clara found Alexander standing in the hall outside the sick room. Again, he seemed to have become very good at standing outside doors. She stepped into the hall and closed the door softly behind her. Say what you were waiting to say. He looked tired. Not physically. Morally. The decree protects Ethan from the council, he said. But it also limits me. Yes. I wrote it that way deliberately. I know. I wanted you to know that I understand what that means. Clara leaned against the wall. Do you? His jaw tightened. If Ethan never calls me father, I cannot force the world to treat me as one. The sentence lay between them. Bare. Costly. Correct. Clara did not comfort him. He did not ask her to. After a while, she said, blood gave you a connection. It did not give you a relationship. Alexander nodded. I know. Do not say that too easily. His eyes lifted. I am trying not to. The answer was better. Not perfect. Better. Voices drifted from the lower hall. Guards. Low conversation. The way station had become a strange border between worlds. Not Briar Hollow. Not palace. Not home. Not exile. Clara was tired of borders. Alexander looked toward the closed sickroom door. When he is strong enough, where will you go? Back to Briar Hollow. Pain passed through him. He held it. Good. She blinked. That was not the answer she expected. He continued. It is his home. Yes. And yours. Yes. His voice lowered. May I visit when Ethan asks? If Ethan asks. And if you do not want me there, then you wait. He nodded. Then I wait. Clara studied him. The old Alexander would have heard wait as insult. This one heard it as instruction. Perhaps grief was making him teachable. Or perhaps fatherhood discovered too late had stripped pride of its usefulness. She did not know. She would not decide tonight. Alexander. He stilled at his name. Not your majesty. Not because she softened. Because the hallway was not court. Do not build your redemption on Ethan wanting you. His face changed. She continued. He is a child. Some days he may want your stories. Some days he may hate your face. Some days he may ask for apples, and some days he may refuse your letters. You do not get to become better only when he gives you hope. Alexander closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they were wet. I know. She gave him a look. He corrected himself. I am trying to know. That was honest enough. Clara nodded. Good. She turned to go back inside. His voice stopped her. Clara. She paused. I loved you. The words came quiet. Past tense and present grief braided together. Clara kept her hand on the door. I know. His breath caught. She looked back. That was never the part one doubted most. The hallway went silent. Alexander seemed to absorb the sentence through the bones. She entered the room before he could answer. Ethan slept with one hand open on the blanket, the sparrow feather beside him, the blue scarf twisted near his chin. Clara sat beside him. Outside, Alexander remained in the hall. Inside, her son breathed steadily. The decree lay folded in her pocket. For the first time since the wolf attack, Clara allowed her shoulders to lower. Not because the future was safe. Because the law now said what she had known alone in the dark 7 years ago. Ethan was not a secret. He was not a solution. He was not a crown's possession. He was her son. And if Alexander wanted to become anything more than blood, he would have to learn what Clara had learned the hard way. Love did not begin with claiming. It began with staying outside the door until invited in. The day Ethan returned to Briar Hollow, no bells rang. Clara insisted on that. No royal escort through the village. No banners. No announcement that a child with royal blood had come home. Only one carriage, two quiet guards left at the edge of the road, Ruth in the front seat arguing with the driver about speed, and Alexander Whitmore riding behind at a distance. Ethan had chosen himself. Not beside, not ahead, behind. Far enough that Daisy does not think he owns the road, Ethan had said. Alexander had accepted the instruction with solemn gravity. Clara had looked out the carriage window and almost laughed. Almost. Then she saw Briar Hollow appear between the trees, small and gray and smoky in the afternoon light, and the laugh disappeared into something deeper. Home. Not safe in the old way. The village had seen too much now. The wolf attack. The Royal Scouts. Marcus. The fever. The boy's silver command. Rumors had moved faster than horses, and by the time the carriage rolled onto Willow Lane, every curtain in Briar Hollow had learned to tremble politely. But the cottage still stood. The roof still sagged. The kitchen window still stuck. The woodpile remained crooked because Ethan had stacked it badly before the attack, and Clara had been too tired to fix it. The ordinary imperfection of it nearly undid her. Ethan leaned forward as the carriage stopped. "Can I get down by myself?" Clara looked at his face. Still pale. Stronger. Determined in the way children became when illness had made too many adults touch their blankets. "Yes," she said. Slowly, Ruth opened the carriage door and announced, "If you fall, I will say I told you so before helping." Ethan smiled. He climbed down carefully. His feet touched the muddy lane. He stood there for a moment, breathing in the smell of chimney smoke, damp earth, herbs, and the life that had belonged to him before the kingdom learned his name. Then Mr. Hobb appeared from nowhere with his old hat in his hands. "Well," he said. The boy came back taller. "I was gone 4 days," Ethan said. "Royal blood stretches people." Ruth snorted. "Nonsense." Mr. Hobb winked. Ethan smiled again. That was when Clara saw the villagers gathering. Not crowding. Not bowing. Just standing. Mrs. Price held Anna's hand at the edge of the lane. Mr. Dutton leaned on a cane, arm bandaged. The turnip woman from long ago, older now but still sharp-eyed, stood near the market road with a basket against her hip. They looked at Ethan, then at Clara, then at the man who had dismounted behind the carriage and remained near the old fence with a cloth bag of apples in one hand. No one bowed to Alexander. Not because they did not know, because Briar Hollow had protected Clara before it respected kings. Alexander noticed. Clara saw him notice. He did not correct anyone. Good. Mrs. Price stepped forward first. Anna hid behind her skirt, then peeked out at Ethan. "Thank you," Mrs. Price said. Not to Alexander. To Ethan. The boy's face reddened. "I just said stop." Anna lifted the broken doll from beneath her arm. "You sounded scary." Ethan looked stricken. Clara's hand moved toward him. Alexander's body shifted once. Both stopped. Mrs. Price knelt beside her daughter. "Scary can be good when it saves someone," she said. Anna considered this, then held out a small paper flower. "I made this because Ruth said Rayal flowers die, and that is rude." Ruth looked proud. Ethan took the paper flower carefully. "Thank you." The village exhaled a little. Not fully. Enough. Alexander stood apart from it all, watching his son be welcomed by people who had no blood claim and no royal obligation. They had known him as Ethan before the stone did. That was something the palace could never steal. Daisy tested Alexander before sunset. Ethan demanded it. Dr. Greer, who had followed under protest and Ruth's command, allowed 10 minutes of mild, stable activity. Ruth allowed 5. Ethan negotiated 8 again. Alexander wisely said nothing. The stable smelled of hay, damp wood, and mere judgment. Daisy leaned over the half door, ears forward, dark eyes fixed on Alexander, as if she had been briefed on 7 years of court failure. Ethan sat on an overturned bucket wrapped in a blanket, Clara beside him, Ruth behind him, Mr. Hobb near the door, Marcus outside pretending not to listen. Alexander opened the cloth bag. Normal apples. Slightly bruised. Bought in the lower market, Clara guessed. Not palace fruit. Ethan inspected one. Acceptable. Alexander held it out. Flat. Wrong. Daisy's lips peeled back. Ethan sighed with the disappointment of a teacher whose student had ignored every lesson. "No. Like this." He demonstrated with his own small hand. Palm angled, fingers tucked. Alexander watched with complete attention. Then tried again. Daisy took the apple without biting him. Ethan nodded. "She does not hate you." Ruth muttered, "There is time." Alexander looked at the mayor, then at Ethan. "I will consider that mercy." Clara stood by the stall door, watching the scene settle into her bones. A king feeding apples badly. A child correcting him. A village pretending not to stare. No marble. No sacred stone. No council record. Just the kind of ordinary moment Alexander had never understood enough to choose. He looked at Clara then. Not pleading. Not proud. Only present. That was worse. Because presence could grow roots if she let it. She turned away first. After dinner, Ethan fell asleep at the kitchen table with his cheek near a bowl of stew. The day had cost him more than he admitted. Alexander stood at once, then stopped. Looked at Clara. "May I carry him?" The room went silent. Ruth's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. Mr. Hobb suddenly found the ceiling interesting. Clara looked at Ethan. Her son was deeply asleep, one hand curled around the paper flower Anna had given him. A week ago, she would have said no before the question finished. Tonight, she did not answer quickly. That frightened her. Alexander waited. No wounded expression. No pressure. Only waiting. Clara crossed to Ethan and touched his hair. "Ethan," she whispered. He stirred. Alexander is asking if he may carry you to bed." Ethan's eyes opened slightly. Sleepy. Unfocused. He looked at Alexander. "Do not drop me." Alexander's face changed. "I will not. Ruth will poison you." "I know." Ruth nodded. "He knows." Ethan's eyes closed again. "Okay." Alexander moved slowly. Very slowly. As if lifting a sacred thing. As if 7 years of absence had gathered into one sleeping child, and any roughness might wake the whole wound. He slid one arm beneath Ethan's knees, the other behind his back, and lifted. Ethan's head fell against his shoulder. Alexander stopped breathing. Clara saw it. Everyone saw it. The king stood in a poor cottage kitchen holding his son for the first time without fever, without crisis, without sacred light forcing truth into the air. Just wait. Warm. Trusting only because sleep had lowered the guard. Alexander's eyes filled. He closed them once, then opened them before emotion could become a demand on the room. "Where?" he asked softly. Clara led him to the small room beside hers. Ethan's bed was narrow, the blanket patched. The shelf above it held a carved wolf, 3 smooth stones, the basket where the sparrow named King had slept before flying away, and now a space waiting for something else. Alexander laid Ethan down carefully. Too carefully. The boy stirred but did not wake. Clara pulled the blanket over him. Alexander stood beside the bed, hands empty now. He looked smaller without the child in his arms. No, not smaller. Less protected by power. Ethan mumbled in sleep. "Apples tomorrow." Alexander's mouth trembled. "Yes," he whispered. "Apples tomorrow." Clara looked at him sharply. He understood the danger of the promise after he made it. "I mean," he corrected softly, "if your mother allows me to come tomorrow, and if you still want apples." Ethan was asleep, but Clara heard. That mattered. They stepped back into the hallway. The cottage was too narrow for royal distance. Alexander stood close because the walls allowed nothing else. Clara felt his scent thin, familiar beneath travel, rain, and restraint. For 1 second, the Alpha King's chambers returned. Black marble, silver clasp, a hand searching an empty pillow. She stepped back. Alexander saw. Pain crossed his face. He moved away immediately. "Good. I will leave now," he said. Clara nodded. "Marcus arranged rooms at the inn." "I know. I will not come tomorrow unless Ethan asks." "I know." He looked toward the small bedroom, then back at her. "Thank you for letting me carry him." Clara's mouth tightened. "Do not make gratitude into a claim." He bowed his head. "You are right." The phrase had become familiar from him. She still did not trust familiarity. He walked to the door, opened it, paused at the threshold, not looking back yet. "Clara." She waited. "I keep thinking about the morning you left." Her chest tightened. "So do I." He turned slightly. "I woke holding the clasp." She said nothing. "I thought it was a message meant to hurt me." Clara almost smiled. Not with humor. With exhaustion. It was the only thing in that room that had been mine to return. Alexander absorbed that. His hand closed once around nothing. "I still have it." The hallway changed. Clara did not move. Of course he had kept it. Men often treasured symbols after failing the person attached to them. "Why tell me?" "Because I used to think keeping it meant I had not lost you completely." His voice lowered. "Now I know it means you had nothing else you could safely leave behind." The words entered her quietly. Too quietly. She looked toward the kitchen where Ruth was deliberately banging dishes to prove she was not listening. What do you want me to say? Nothing. Good. He nodded, then reached into his coat and took out a small wrapped cloth. He did not offer it to her. He placed it on the narrow table beside the door. Not for you to take now, he said. Or ever, if you do not want it. I only do not want to keep a returned thing as if it still belongs to me. Clara stared at the cloth. The silver clasp. 7 years old. Cold before dawn. Her first proof that leaving had been real. You brought it here? Yes. That was dangerous. Yes. You thought I might throw it at you. I thought Ruth might. From the kitchen, Ruth called, still considering. Despite herself, Clara almost laughed. Alexander heard the almost. Did not reach for it. I will go, he said. This time he did. The door closed softly behind him. Clara stood in the hallway for a long time. Then she walked to the table and unwrapped the cloth. The silver clasp lay inside. Polished. Untarnished. Beautiful in the way cold things could be beautiful. She did not touch it at first. Memory touched it for her. A younger Clara smiling because a private gift had felt like a promise. A frightened Clara placing it beside a sleeping man's hand. A pregnant Clara walking through mist with no name for her child except the one she would give him herself. A mother now, standing in her own cottage while that same man waited at an inn because he had not been invited to stay. Ruth came to the doorway. What will you do with it? Clara looked at the clasp. I do not know. That is allowed. Yes. Ruth leaned against the frame. The boy liked him carrying him. Clara closed her eyes. I know. And you hated that. Yes. And liked it. Clara opened her eyes. Ruth was merciless. A blessing. Yes. The old woman nodded. Then sleep before feelings make decisions they cannot pay for. Clara covered the clasp again, but she did not put it in the locked box. Not yet. She left it on the table by the door. Neither hidden nor worn. Neither forgiven nor rejected. A returned thing waiting for its meaning to change, or not. That night, Clara slept lightly. Old habits. New fears. At dawn, she woke to quiet. No alarm. No royal voice. No knocking. Only Ethan breathing in the next room, and a folded paper slipped beneath the cottage door. Her body tensed before she recognized Alexander's handwriting. She opened it. One sentence. Ethan asked for apples tomorrow. I will wait at the inn until he asks again. No plea. No guilt. No, I miss you. No, let me come. Only the boundary repeated back to her. Clara stood in the morning light with the silver clasp still on the table and the note in her hand. For 7 years, she had survived by choosing which fears were allowed inside the house. Today, a new fear stood patiently outside. Not Alexander. Hope. She folded the note once, then placed it beside the clasp. In the bedroom, Ethan stirred. Mom, I'm here. Is it tomorrow? Clara looked at the door. Yes. Can Alexander bring apples? She closed her eyes. Breathed. Open them. Yes, she said softly. He can bring apples. The answer did not fix the past. It did not return her to the chambers. It did not make Alexander father by right or husband by regret. It only opened the door one ordinary inch. And sometimes, Clara thought as dawn touched the poor cottage walls, 1 inch honestly given was more dangerous and more real than every secret promise Alexander had ever made in the dark. Alexander Whitmore brought apples the next morning. Not early, not late. Exactly when Ethan had asked. That mattered more than the apples. Clara saw him through the kitchen window before he knocked. He stood outside the cottage door with a small cloth bag in one hand. No crown, no escort crowding the lane, no royal carriage turning Willow Lane into spectacle. Marcus waited near the inn road, far enough to be security and not pressure. Alexander lifted his hand, then paused. He did not knock until Clara opened the door. That mattered too. Ethan appeared behind her in his blue scarf, hair still messy from sleep, eyes brighter than they had been in days. You came. Alexander looked at him. Yes. You waited at the inn? Yes. You did not come before I asked. No, Ethan considered this with the grave authority of a child who had learned adults could fail simple instructions. Then he nodded. Good. Daisy likes discipline. From the kitchen, Ruth said, So do I. Alexander bowed his head slightly. I will remember that. Clara stepped aside. Not far. Only enough. Alexander entered the cottage for the second time. The room did not shrink around him today. Yesterday, His presence had made every wall remember the palace. Today, he looked like a large man standing carefully in a small kitchen, aware that his power did not fit here unless he folded it down. Ethan pointed at the bag. "Show me." Alexander opened it. Normal apples. Some red, some yellow, one bruised at the side. Ethan inspected them. "This one is ugly. I thought Daisy might appreciate variety. She will appreciate biting you if you are careless." "Then I will not be careless." The sentence entered the kitchen quietly. Clara looked at him. Alexander did not look away, but he did not turn the words into an apology either. Good. Some sentences needed to stand without being dressed. At the stable, Daisy accepted the first apple. Then the second. On the third, Alexander held his palms slightly wrong. The mare snapped. "Not hard. Enough." Ethan burst into laughter. Real laughter. Open. Unguarded. The sound struck Alexander harder than the bite. Clara saw it happen. His face changed with a grief so tender it almost looked like joy. He lowered his hand before emotion could become something Ethan had to carry. "She is a strict teacher," he said. Ethan laughed again. "She warned you." "She did. You should listen better." "Yes," Alexander said softly. "I should." Ruth, standing beside Clara with her arms folded, made a sound that could have been approval if dragged through gravel. For 2 weeks, Alexander came only when Ethan asked. Some days Ethan wanted apples. Some days he wanted stories about the old moon chapel. Some days he asked Alexander to sit outside the cottage while he read, not because he wanted to talk, but because he wanted to see whether a king could stay bored without leaving. Alexander stayed. He learned Briar Hollow in pieces. The well that froze first. The crooked fence Mr. Hobb refused to repair properly. The turnip woman whose name was Mrs. Vale and whose bread Clara still remembered from the morning she fled. The chapel bell that rang too loudly. The roof leak above Clara's sewing table. He offered once to fix the roof. Clara said no. The next week, Ethan asked if Alexander knew how to climb. Alexander said yes. Ruth said kings lying near rooftops was how widows were made. Mr. Hobb brought a ladder and watched like a man hoping for royal injury. Alexander climbed. Badly. Ethan shouted instructions from the yard. Clara stood below with her arms wrapped around herself, trying not to remember black marble and closed doors while the same man balanced on her poor cottage roof, holding a hammer. He missed the nail twice. Ethan groaned. "Do kings not have roofs?" "We have roofs," Alexander said. "Then why are you bad at them?" "Because I paid other people to understand what kept rain off my head." Ruth muttered. "There is a metaphor trying to kill us." Clara turned away before her smile could become too visible. That evening, the roof no longer leaked. Alexander did not mention it. He did not say, "I fixed something." He did not wait for gratitude. He only washed his hands at the pump, accepted a cup of water from Ethan, and returned to the inn before dusk because Clara had not invited him to dinner. On the 15th day, a formal letter arrived from the palace. The council requested Ethan's appearance for a succession blessing. Alexander received the same letter at the inn. He came to Clara's cottage with it unopened. That was what Ethan noticed first. "You did not read it?" Alexander held the seal out. "It concerns you. Your mother should see it before I answer." Clara took the letter. Her fingers were steady now. That surprised her. Fear still came, but it no longer owned every movement. She read the request once, then handed it to Ethan. He sounded out the harder words slowly. "Succession blessing." His nose wrinkled. "What is that?" Alexander answered from the doorway. "A ceremony where the court tries to make the future look settled." "Do I have to go?" "No." Clara looked at him. Alexander met her eyes. "No," he repeated. "Not unless you want to. Not unless your mother agrees. Not while the word blessing is being used to hurry you into a role you have not chosen." Ethan looked relieved, then suspicious. "Do you want me to go?" Alexander breathed in. "Yes." Clara's chest tightened. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Alexander continued before the answer could rot. "I want the world to know you cannot be denied. I want to stand beside you publicly because I failed to stand beside your mother. I want many things, but wanting is not the same as deciding." Ethan thought about that, then looked at Clara. "Do you want me to go?" Clara knelt beside him. "I want you to have time." "Then no." She nodded. "Then no." Alexander took the letter back only after she offered it. He wrote the refusal at Clara's kitchen table. Not as king alone. As a man copying boundaries he had finally stopped resenting. Ethan Bennett will not attend. His identity is already confirmed. His future will not be rushed to comfort the council. He showed it to Clara, then to Ethan. Ethan added one line in careful handwriting at the bottom. I do not want a blessing until I know what it blesses. Alexander stared at the sentence for a long time, then sealed the letter with the royal crest. 3 days later, the palace accepted the refusal. Not happily, but publicly. That was enough. For now, summer deepened around Briar Hollow. The sparrow named King returned once, landing on the cottage fence as if inspecting the life that had saved him. Ethan declared this a good omen. Ruth declared birds unreliable. Daisy tried to eat Alexander's sleeve again. Mr. Hobb began calling him Roof King, which no one corrected. And Clara lived. That was the quietest miracle. She woke without planning escape routes first. She worked at her sewing table while Ethan read near the hearth. She walked to market without every black cloak becoming a threat. She watched Alexander earn space in her son's life without turning that space into claim. It did not happen beautifully. Some days Ethan was eager. Some days he was cold. Once, after hearing village children whisper Prince, he refused to see Alexander for 2 days. Alexander waited at the inn. No note. No guilt. No apples left dramatically at the door. On the 3rd day, Ethan sent Ruth with one sentence. He can come tomorrow, but no questions about why. Alexander came tomorrow. Asked no questions. That was the day Clara began to believe the change might survive disappointment. Not trust fully. Not forgiveness. Belief. A smaller word. Safer. One evening, nearly a month after the Old Moon Chapel, Clara found Alexander standing by the cottage fence after Ethan had gone inside. He had not crossed into the yard. She walked to him because she chose to. The sky was violet above the lower woods. Fireflies blinked over the grass. The repaired roof held firm behind her. On the table inside, the silver clasp still lay wrapped in cloth beside Alexander's first note from the inn. Neither hidden nor worn. Still undecided. Alexander looked at the cottage, then at her. I have been asked to return to the palace tomorrow. Her body went quiet. He saw it. Of course he did. This time, he did not rush to soothe. Border Council, he said. 3 days. Marcus will remain here if you permit it. I will write to Ethan before I leave, not after. Clara looked toward the stable. Does Ethan know? I wanted to ask you how to tell him without making it another wound. The answer did something strange inside her. For years, Alexander had made choices and left her to soften them afterward. Now he brought the hard edge before cutting. Tell him plainly, she said. Tell him when you leave. Tell him when you return. Do not promise earlier than you know. He nodded. And if the council creates another emergency while you are there? His mouth tightened. Then I decide whether it is truly mine to solve. And if Isabella sends for you? He looked at her. No flinch. No offense. She has written twice. Through formal channels. I answered once, publicly, through Marcus. I will not meet her privately. The name did not hurt the same way now. It still hurt, but it no longer owned the room. Clara nodded. Alexander's voice lowered. I am not telling you this so you will believe me faster. Good. I am telling you because secrecy is where I learned to be cruel. She looked at him then. The sentence was true. That was why it hurt. Inside the cottage, Ethan called for Ruth, accusing her of hiding the last honey cake. Ruth replied that children with royal blood still needed manners. Life continued around them, ordinary and sharp and warm. Alexander looked toward the sound. I love him, he said. Clara's throat tightened. I know. I love you. The world did not stop. That surprised her. Once, those words would have pulled her back into any room he opened. Now they stood between them like something beautiful that still needed permission to enter. Clara looked at him for a long time. I know that too. Pain moved through his eyes. Not because she was cruel. Because love, finally named in daylight, had arrived after she had learned to live without needing it to survive. I am not asking you to come back, he said. Good. I am not asking for the chambers. Her face hardened slightly. He bowed his head. I know. I should not even say them as if they are an option. No, she said. You should not. He accepted it. Then, quietly, if there is ever a room for me near your life, I want to earn it in the open. Clara looked toward the cottage door. Ethan's laughter spilled out, followed by Ruth's indignant shout. A room. Not chambers. Not throne. Not secret. A room earned in the open. She did not answer with softness. She answered with truth. Maybe one day there will be a chair at my table. Alexander went still. Clara lifted one hand before hope could become too large. Not now. He bowed his head. Not now. And not because you are king. No. And not because you are Ethan's blood. No. And not because you regret what happened. His voice roughened. No. If it happens, it will be because the person you become can sit there without turning the table into a debt. Alexander closed his eyes once. When he opened them, they were wet. I understand. Do not understand too quickly. A faint, broken smile touched his mouth. I am trying to understand slowly. That was better. The next morning, Alexander told Ethan he had to leave for 3 days. He did it at the stable, with Daisy between them and Clara standing nearby. Ethan went quiet. Alexander waited. I thought you said you would come tomorrow, Ethan said. I did. That was before the border council was called. I should not have said tomorrow without knowing. Ethan looked at the ground. Are you coming back? Yes. On the 4th morning. What if you do not? Then your mother will decide whether I am allowed to explain. Ethan looked at Clara. She nodded. The answer steadied him. Not because it promised Alexander. Because it promised Clara's protection. Ethan swallowed. Can I give you something to bring back? Alexander's breath caught. Yes. Ethan ran into the cottage and returned with the paper flower Anna had made. It is not for you, he said. Alexander took it carefully. Who is it for? For me. You bring it back so I know you did. Alexander closed his hand around it. A test. A trust. A child's way of tying return to something visible. I will bring it back. Ethan pointed at him. Not crushed. Not crushed. Alexander left without ceremony. No embrace forced. No dramatic farewell. Only a man riding away with a paper flower tucked inside his coat, and a child watching from the stable fence. On the 4th morning, he returned. Before breakfast. The paper flower uncrushed. Ethan ran halfway across the yard before stopping himself. Alexander stopped too. Let the boy choose the last distance. Ethan walked the rest. Not fast. Not slow. He took the paper flower, inspected it, and nodded. You came back. Alexander's voice was rough. Yes. Ethan looked at him. Then, for the first time, said, Father. The yard went silent. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. Ruth, from the doorway, swore softly and blamed dust again. Alexander did not move. Did not reach. Did not turn the word into ownership. Tears filled his eyes and stayed there. Yes, he said, barely audible. Ethan looked embarrassed immediately. It does not mean all the time. Alexander nodded quickly. No, only when it feels true. Today it felt true. That is enough. Ethan handed him an apple. Then feed Daisy before she changes her mind about you. Alexander laughed once. Broken. Alive. He took the apple. Clara watched them at the fence, father and son standing in morning light, not healed by blood, but connected by return. That evening, she set 3 plates on the cottage table. One for Ethan, one for herself, one at the far side, where a simple wooden chair had been pulled from the wall. Alexander stood at the door when he saw it. His face emptied, then carefully closed around the emotion before it could become too much. Clara looked at him. This is dinner, she said. He nodded. Dinner. Not a promise. I know. Not a crown. No, not the chambers. Pain flickered. No, just a chair. Alexander looked at the chair as if it were more sacred than the bloodstone. Yes. Ethan, already sitting, rolled his eyes. Are adults always like this about furniture? Ruth said, only when they deserve to be. Clara almost laughed, then did. Softly, openly. No one claimed the sound. No one asked her to repeat it. Alexander sat where she had placed him. Not at the head. There was no head of Clara's table. That was important. Dinner was uneven. Real. Ethan talked too much about Daisy. Ruth insulted the palace 3 times. Alexander burned his tongue on stew because he answered Ethan too quickly. Clara listened, corrected, smiled once, grew quiet twice, and remained. After dinner, Alexander washed all 3 plates without being asked. Ethan dried one. Clara dried one. Ruth inspected the last and declared it barely acceptable. Later, when Ethan slept and Ruth pretended to sleep, Clara stood alone by the small table near the door. The silver clasp lay there in its cloth. Alexander had not asked about it once. That was why she finally picked it up. The metal was cool in her palm, not as cold as she remembered. Or perhaps her hand had changed. She walked outside. Alexander stood by the fence, preparing to leave for the inn. She held out the clasp. He went still. I do not want it back as a gift, she said. He looked at the silver in her hand, then at her. What do you want? Clara breathed in the night air. Pine. Mud. Smoke. Home. I want it melted. Alexander's eyes widened slightly. She continued. Not destroyed. Changed. Understanding moved slowly across his face. Into what? Clara looked toward Ethan's window. A small pin. Plain. For Ethan's cloak. No crest. No crown. Just silver. Something that began in secrecy and became his because he was never the shame in it. Alexander's eyes filled again. He took the clasp only after she placed it fully in his palm. I will have it done. No royal jeweler announcing it. No inscription about heirs. No story except the one I choose to tell him. Alexander closed his fingers around the silver. Yes. They stood quietly beneath the stars. 7 years ago, she had left him a clasp because she had no other safe language. Now she handed it to him because she did. That was not forgiveness. But it was no longer exile. Alexander bowed his head. Thank you. Clara looked at him. For what? For letting the meaning change. She considered that, then said, Do not make it sentimental before the work is done. A soft laugh escaped him. She allowed it. The next week, Ethan wore a plain silver pin on his blue scarf. No one in Briar Hollow knew what it had been. That was Clara's choice. No one in the palace was told who made it. That was also Clara's choice. When Ethan asked, she said, It came from something I once left behind. He touched it. Was it sad? Yes. Is it still? Clara looked across the yard where Alexander was losing an argument with Daisy, badly. Not only. Ethan seemed to accept that. Children often understood transformation better than adults. Months passed. Not as a montage of healing. As work. Alexander returned to the palace when needed and came back when he said he would. Sometimes late, but never unexplained. Ethan learned maps with him, argued with him, refused him, ran to him twice, and regretted it both times from embarrassment. Clara kept sewing, kept the cottage, kept her name. The council learned, slowly and painfully, that Ethan Bennett was not available for political hunger. Victoria testified. Havers lost his seat. Helen Ward recorded everything with devastating accuracy. Marcus became very good at saying no. And Alexander learned the discipline of being loved conditionally. Not as punishment, as truth. Years later, people would tell the story badly. They would say Clara Bennett vanished from the Alpha King's chambers without a word, and fate brought her back 7 years later with his heir. They would make it sound romantic. They would make it sound like destiny had corrected a misunderstanding. They would forget the side door, the old guard, the bread from a stranger, the fever, the child asking whether silence could be mean, the mother who named her son before any stone did. They would forget that fate did not bring Clara back to Alexander. Fate brought Alexander to the edge of Clara's life and made him wait until she opened the door. One autumn evening, long after Ethan had begun calling him father more often than Alexander, but less often than he could have, Clara set 3 plates on the cottage table. Ethan noticed. Alexander noticed. Ruth pretended not to notice and failed. Clara looked at Alexander. You may stay for dinner. He smiled softly. I know. No, she said. His face stilled. She placed the 3rd plate down. This time, you may stay after. The room went silent. Ethan looked between them. After dinner? Yes. At the cottage? Yes. Ruth folded her arms. There will be rules. Alexander bowed his head. I expected none less. Clara met his eyes. This is not returning to your chambers. No, this is not erasing what happened. No, this is me choosing what room, what table, what door. Alexander's voice was low. Yes. And if I ask you to leave, I leave. She nodded, then sat. Ethan grinned into his cup like a child pretending not to understand everything. Dinner began. No crown, no court, no secret. Only a woman who had once vanished because she had no safe place to stand, a child who had returned to the world with his name intact, and a king who had learned that love was not proven by claiming what fate returned. It was proven by being invited in. An St.